People who get locked into a vision. All right, that's it, man. That's their drive. That's their passion. Critics don't matter. This don't matter. They're going to do whatever it fucking takes to be the best at what they do.
And this is Dave Tate with another edition of Table Talk. Today we got Swede 5th Set Burns with us. Last time you were here and we did this, we had the little things, the little mics that went under our shirts.
Oh my God.
Little clip-on things and stuff like that. So
yeah, this is better.
Now it's a little more comfortable. We got this big-ass mic we got to suck into.
I feel like I'm on Joe Rogan.
In the gym. Joe Rogan in the gym.
Yeah.
So for the people that are listening that don't know your training methodology, let's kind of summarize it up a little bit.
Okay, so 5th set is it's a type of concurrent periodization. Although there are parts of it that are periodized more specifically, more focused than others throughout the course of the year. There's a 6-month macrocycle model, approximately 6 months, that includes a peak. So essentially, it's about fatigue accumulation to that point, and we're just kind of trying to mitigate fatigue along the way to some degree so that we can accumulate it over a long period of time. And then when we drop that, there's sort of the long-term delayed training effect that takes place. I explain that a lot in the second book. And that's how the peak works. And then we do a competition, and essentially you would fit about 2 macros per year, which would allow for 2 full competitions a year. And it's just basically like a plug-and-play method. It's everything you need, soup to nuts, from the beginning to the end, and how to re-up and start over and do it all again.
Is there a specific demographic this is targeted towards?
Not necessarily. I have a lot of beginners, but I also have a lot of, extremely advanced people. Like Ellen is, God, she's almost 30 years into this. She's 66 years old and totaling somewhere around 1,100 in reps at 132. Mm-hmm. And over 1,000, pretty close to 1,100 actually, mm-hmm. raw at 132. We've had obviously JP, lots of big names and people that are higher up in terms of being gifted with talent. Also, like Greg's doing it too. He's been doing it for a number of years now. It's helped him kind of hold it together and be able to still perform. A little bit later in life too, which is another benefit to it. We got a lot of people that are a little bit older that are really kicking ass with it because they're able to continue to train for competition, essentially, which is hard to do, when you get to a certain age or when you have a certain number of competitive years under your belt.
I'm familiar with it from reading it and doing some of the stuff here and there. For the beginners, which I'm sure most of the people listening to this are going to be beginners,
right.
Intermediates. It's an easy plug and play, like you said, program to just jump onto.
Yeah. Because
you kind of took a lot of the shit out, a lot of the guesswork out.
Yeah.
So it can be very, what I call audible ready, for the more advanced people to be able to kind of pivot when mm-hmm. they need to. But that's not a huge component of the program because it's laid out saying basically do this and do that. So I want to put that out there for those people that are looking for a program to do that. This is a very viable option that could actually save them a lot of money compared to hiring their favorite online guru.
Custom coaching.
Yeah.
Which is essentially just the same template that everybody else gets.
Yeah.
But what's good about these templates is that they actually are somewhat self-regulating and they adjust to the individual. So we use the Mraps in a way that's diagnostic and corrective. So if you look at, like, for example, the rules, even in the original protocols and stuff, the rules had it set up so that if you get less than 3 reps on the Mrap, that means you failed out. So essentially fatigue is too high because we know that if you're not able to perform that amount of volume at that percentage, fatigue is probably way too high. And there's a nice range there where you're in an effective stimulus range where you can get the adaptation you want and you're nowhere near doing too much. And then we have that sort of stopgap and self-regulating mechanism there to protect you from getting too much. Because some people have lower recoverability, lower adaptability, plus you don't know what's going on in somebody's life, fighting with their wife, sleeping in the trunk, you know what I mean?
The trunk.
The trunk. Well, hopefully not the trunk. If you're sleeping in the trunk, it's too late, I can't help you. But yeah, you know, I mean, that's the sort of thing that, you know, these things happen. Like, stuff shows up in life, you know, your house floods, whatever. And it's important to have that stuff in place, because that's how you get hurt. That's a major risk factor for injury. And you get too far into that where you have too much suppression, where, like, when you're carrying fatigue, right? Fatigue will inhibit your ability to express your current level of fitness in any marker. For example, we care about strength. So if you're carrying a lot of central fatigue, it will inhibit your ability to express your current level of strength, right? So that's sort of how the peak works. We switch the direction from doing like volume, and we move more into very specific preparedness. So in other words, we're doing exactly what we do in competition and training. So all the lifts are, for the most part, all the lifts are 90% or better, which if you're using our formula for attempt selection, every lift on the platform is going to be 90% or better. So it's really exactly what we're doing. You get a lot of practice with it. We even add commands in at one part. But essentially, I found that nobody really has much issue with the transition from pausing and not pausing and using commands and not using commands, as long as they have a good command of the movement, or they have a good, like, checklist to follow. Like, I have checklists I use for each movement. Like for the squat, for example, it's like air, neck, brace, squat. Obviously, I go through and explain what each thing means, but when you do it that way, when you have like a systemized approach to coaching, to technique, every single rep is performed the same way. There's really no issue adding stuff like, when the time comes to pause for a bench, your benches are all exactly the same. You're ready. There's no issue. I never had a single person have an issue with it. As far as the difference, like how much difference it can make to drop that fatigue, we have a really good handle on that number. It's around 4%. So like, for example, on squat or deadlift, the number that people hit in the beginning of their peaking cycle, which with the extended peak is 44 days out from competition, by the time they're actually taking new 100s, they're a micro in, so maybe 35 days out, something like that. The numbers, they start hitting them from 35 days out through that subsequent microcycle, we're able to hit 4% more. So that 100% is used to call their attempts in the meet, and they'll do 90, 97, and 104. And we have about a 90% success rate with that. So that's insane. Mm-hmm. When you look at it that way, it's like, so there is a difference of about 4% that fatigue is preventing, because it's not like in 30 days they got stronger.
Yeah.
Definitely not 4% stronger.
No.
We just dropped the amount of work they're doing. Is as the intensity is increasing, the overall work they're doing is significantly less. The total tonnage is less. Like, it's significantly less than what they're used to. The work capacity is built up extremely high. Then we sort of drop the amount of work that they have to do moving into the meet, and it gets very specific. And the result is we're able to drop all that fatigue we accumulated and for the first time express this new, like, you know, actually with the real characteristics that we've developed, because they're not suppressed anymore by carrying all that fatigue. You know?
Yeah, I've always said that your competitive max should be, you know, 4 to 10% higher than what your competitive max is.
Right.
And a lot of people will say, well, mine's not that way. And my reply is, you're training too heavy.
Yeah.
You know, you're not letting the fatigue,
yeah,
you know, bust through, or not bust through, but you're not managing the fatigue for the proper peak for meet. And that's what the whole purpose of the training is.
Right.
You know, to increase the stimulus, stop, let the body recover, and then to super compensate.
Get that super compensation.
You know, barring fucking mistakes and stupid calls. And I mean, there's a lot of other factors that go into a meet, you know, that come into play. But when you're looking at the training, I think you got to kind of exclude those.
Right, because you don't know.
Because some things are controllable, some aren't.
And that's why, like, if I'm at a meet too, like if I'm coaching one of my lifters, like, I'm that much more confident that they're not going to make a stupid decision.
Yeah.
So you know that, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That all the work you put into it and the planning and having that fatigue gone, like, we want to get what we came for out of that.
Yeah.
And not have to go through this whole process again before you put the numbers up.
Yeah, because, you know, no judge is going to give you your best triple in the gym on the platform.
Exactly.
You have to display not only your ability to do that, but more. You
got to execute. You know, if you can't execute, it's kind of pointless to do all this.
Yeah, unless you're training for Instagram.
I mean, this is for fun. Or doing it for psychology, I get it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically where I'm at now. I'm probably going to do another meet, but it's a psychological thing for me now. You know, I just do it. It's like medicine. I need it. And I love fist set training. I love that style of training. For me, it's very challenging to always know that I have to face those AMRAPs at the end of it. And I mean, and then also the subsequent work. But
is that where the real challenge comes?
Well,
with that, well, at least for you.
The AMRAPs, I think everybody would agree, because we don't AMRAP everything all the time. So it'll only be like certain lifts depending where you're at. But so essentially, this is an interesting way I did this, I think. Maybe you'll think so too, I don't know. So I do, like, my MSMs are mechanically similar movements, right? Those are the secondary movements you would essentially call secondary movements normally. But the reason we use that term MSM is because on fist set they have to be mechanically similar. And they're typically just a shortened range of motion. So say you're talking about the bench press, it might be a board press. Talking about deadlift, it might be a rack pull, or it might be a rack pull and block pulls, sumo and conventional, you know. But like say Meso 1, 6 months or so out from a meet, that stuff might look like where you're training in the really higher rep ranges, like 10, 12 reps for the partial range of motion stuff, for like the boards, even rack pulls. I know that sounds crazy, but you can't really argue with the result. As we transition down, it works extremely effectively. So then we move, like maybe in the subsequent cycle, like in 2 and 3, they'll get down to where they're in the lower stuff. And in the beginning, to far out, the beginning cycle, you won't be AMRAPing much. You might only AMRAP like one or two lifts. But by the end, by the time we get to Meso 3, right before the peak, you're actually AMRAPing the main lifts on all 3. But the MSM stuff is significantly lower in volume. So you're doing what's more extremely specific hypertrophy work on that AMRAP. Like if you're doing like 80% for a set of 8, what better recipe could you get for myofibrillar hypertrophy than that? I don't think there is one, you know? So you have that, and that's replacing the very safe shortened range of motion additional work that we were doing earlier in the year. So it might seem like adding the AMRAPs closer to the meet doesn't make sense, but it does when you look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
You know, because the total tonnage is significantly less.
Yeah, yeah.
It's much more specific, though. Like I always say, if you need to put on muscle in an area that's going to benefit the bench press, probably should use the bench press, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like doing that for a set of 8. Like if you're somebody who you're underdeveloped, you got meagerness of body, you don't have enough muscularity to have the joint stability, you need to bench 600 pounds, whatever. Hitting over 80%, between 80 and 85% for a set of 8 is going to be a really, you know, good move.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to do. It's going to be a challenge.
But it's going to be the thing that'll help you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what's going to make that difference. That's what's going to give you that very specific development that you need.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like doing a set at say 82.5%, and you end up getting 8, it's an AMRAP, and you're someone who you need that muscularity. You're underdeveloped. That's what you need. You know, you don't need to do a bunch of, in my opinion, assistance work that's going to somehow give you the hypertrophy you need to bench press. I think bench press is a great tool to build muscle. That's how I built most of mine. You know? Like even when I competed in bodybuilding, I was doing bench press was a main movement. Squat was a main movement. Deadlift was a main movement. That was the stuff that I built my training around. So I think it's a really good way to develop an athlete for the sport of powerlifting, is to actually do the main movements.
Yeah.
That's something that I'm super strong on. And the reason for that is the results I've seen since I've switched to exclusively doing that. Pretty much everybody does well with it. I don't have anyone that's had issues, you know, in terms of being able to make progress consistently.
Yeah. As a washed up, mashed up, beat up meathead, whatever you want to fucking call it, when I look at training programs, because that's why I asked about you specifically, when I look at different training programs, you know, when you've done this shit for 30, 40 years, you realize that the majority of training is really fucking boring. Right. You have to do it. Right. Because you have to do that to create the base to do the shit you really like to do, which for me is like 1 rep max effort.
Everybody likes to do that.
You know,
shit,
or challenge sets, you know, like the AMRAP, or if you're a bodybuilder.
What you're doing with Meadows, basically.
Yeah, load up the fucking leg press with all the weight. Right. And how many, can you do 20? Fuck, you don't know.
Right.
You know, you might be able to do 5, but fuck, can you do 20? And then when you don't know and you start questioning yourself, like, fuck, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Are you scared? No,
Right.
I ain't fucking scared.
Right.
You know, and then you get under there. It's completely fucking stupid, right?
Right. And imagine trying to fight with people to not do that. When
Yeah.
I'm like, I understand. I want to do it too.
I think it has to be built in, but
Yeah.
you know, and it has to be built in safely and constructively.
That's the idea with the AMRAPs and stuff.
Yes.
Is it lets them have a release.
Yeah.
A blow off, like, let's see what you can do. And it's actually something that's going to be productive instead
It'll be productive. And the one thing that you said that resonated with me is it takes a couple months before they're in condition to even do it with the main lifts.
Right.
They can do it with I call them innocent lifts.
Yeah.
You know, the lifts that are almost impossible to get hurt on.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
a board press,
Yeah,
pin,
rack
you know,
pulls.
stuff
Yeah,
like that. You know,
exactly.
it's short
Right.
range. It's really hard to get hurt. It's pretty much all I fucking do anymore.
Innocent lifts. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, don't say that. You're depressing me because now I'm thinking about it. I'm like, wait, do I do innocent lifts?
Yeah,
I think
fuck yeah.
I think
You
that's what my
do
shit is.
innocent lifts, really fucking nasty.
I do. I think that's what I'm doing now. I think I'm like
Fuck
the box
shit out of the
squats.
innocent lift.
Yeah, I'm serious. I'm looking at like what my squats actually look like now, and it's like box squats with a safety squat bar, and I'm like, yeah, I guess that is the most innocent version of a squat.
Yeah, but you still, even with what you're doing, you still back it off. And it's like, how can I get in condition to be able to do that AMRAP with 405 or whatever it's going to be?
No, you have to. Yeah.
Instead, because you can't possibly go in every week if you've been doing this for 40 years.
I think
and
if you
destroy yourself.
You're right, and I agree with 100% with what you said. If you take a look at the big picture, it's almost like you can't just train for the meet. You have to train for the meet.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of what we want when we look at the macro cycle. That's why I'm such a big fan of looking at everything from a big picture standpoint. I feel like if you're going to do the most you can with what you have to take a big picture view, because usually what's good as a short-term strategy that's going to, right away yield some sort of benefit sucks as a medium to long-term strategy.
It's terrible.
Because it's going to tear you apart.
Yeah, the 12-week programs
Right.
suck.
Right, exactly.
Every
Exactly.
time.
Right.
Sucks. Unless you only want to do one meet
Right. You want to do
Ever.
a 12-week program.
ever and be done.
Right.
You know, but I'm a huge proponent of the long term.
Right. You have to.
You know, I'd prefer to have 2 years. Like, where do you want to be in 2 years?
Right.
3 years is really hard for a lot of people to comprehend. And most people won't last that long anyhow, on average. But 2 years, it's like, oh, you want to total your elite or whatever you want to total within 2 years, then you can start clicking back. It's like, okay, that's 24 months out. You want to squat 600 in 24 months. So you don't need to squat 600 in the next 12 weeks.
No, it's always what it is. It's like, oh, 3 months I'm going to do this. It's like, please
Yeah,
don't,
it's like
don't.
they take 3 months and
Don't say that.
focus on just your cueing, your verbal,
Right,
your nonverbal.
right.
Make those commands your checklist that you're talking about.
Right.
Establish a checklist. Spend 3 months seeing if you can make that automatic.
We've been between Greg and I, we do a ton of online coaching, and we've done obviously a million of these seminars now. I don't even have a real number. It's crazy. We were at like somewhere around 4,000 total attendees at all of them. Last time I checked, it's over 100 seminars. So insanity, crazy amount. And at each one of those, we work hands-on with every person. So when you think about just the first contact coaching experience of being able to work with that many people hands-on, one-on-one, first contact, and you run into the same thing.
Yep.
We talked about this a long time ago. Actually, it was the last time. I don't think it was on a show or something. It might have been us just sitting down
chatting.
talking. Yeah, and you were saying about
Find the same problems per
you
region.
eat the same. Okay. So you might answer in the course of your. I forget what it was. You were telling me something about Q&As, and you said you might, in the course of your career as a coach, answer 100,000 questions, but you're really answering the same question, same 50 questions again and again forever. That's it. And when you do that, I do obviously the Q&A on Instagram, on the stories. And I realize it's the same questions, but at least I'm not answering them for each individual person. So everybody that watches, like when you look and there's 4,000 people saw it, it's like, okay, well,
yeah.
I answered that one question 4,000 times.
Yeah, I
There
put
it
all
is.
my AMAs and my highlights, so that way if I'm not doing it, they can go look and see. Then you wonder.
That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I'm like,
they're not going to do that.
How many times have I answered the same question 5 different ways? Sometimes I wonder. But usually there's consistency there. The other thing I found when I was doing seminar after seminar after seminar, kind of like what you guys are doing, is in different regions, in different states, I'd see the same weak points or the same technical issues.
Yeah.
So not really weak points, but the same technical flaws were the same. It was fucking strange.
It's the same cues.
Yeah, I go to
the same
Texas
people.
and it'd be one thing, and Michigan would be another thing, and New York would be a different thing.
I've definitely noticed exactly what you're talking about. There's no doubt about it. And I think it's the cues. I think it's because like in a certain area, there might be an influential coach or lifter that helps a lot of different people, and that stuff kind of like it seeds out.
Yeah,
it spreads out where like then those people help with the thing that they learned,
and it gets a little diluted.
But the thing that they learned, it might not have been perfect to begin with,
or it could have been. It could have been, but it got diluted.
Yeah,
three or four people down, it's no longer the same story.
Right,
when you're in elementary school and you tell one story and it goes around the room, then the last person to tell it is started about a plane, now it's about a boat.
Right. No, totally. Yeah, the whisper down the lane. Yeah. No, definitely. I've seen that too. But yeah, I mean, there's bad cues. I don't want to say there's not bad cues. There's bad cues. There's cues that are bad for certain applications, put it that way. And I hear people say them like a lot, especially in seminars. They'll be like, "Oh, what's like that cue?" And
cues are a tricky thing because when I'm working with people and they'll come out here, say if it's a seminar or something like that, I'm trying to get the fastest result that I can get because I may never see this person again.
That's what cue's for, right?
Yeah, it's like 1 or 2 hours.
Shortcut.
So there's a lot of times that I've told people to arch their lower back on a squat or so forth. And it's not to get them to arch. It's because they're so anteriorly pelvic tilted that when I tell them to arch, they're neutral. So if somebody sees that video, they're like, no, wait a fucking minute. You're not supposed to arch. I'm like, dude.
It's the same thing with the Louis videos, man.
Yes.
Like people are like, oh, he's saying arch, arch. It's like, yeah, they're fighting canvas too. Like you don't even understand.
Exactly.
It's different. You don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah, so you got to be careful when you watch other people cueing, especially in videos and online. And I'm trying to make more of a conscious effort to make that known. I always made it known to who I was speaking to in the group I was speaking to. It's like, this might be good for her, but it's not good for you. Because I got to use the cue that works.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, with the individual too.
Yeah.
So what I've done with that is, because I was using a bunch of different cues for each thing for a long time, and I would try one. If it didn't work, I'd try another. Is I made a series of videos to sort of explain what the cue means. And if you can explain it clearly, like verbally,
that's definitely better because you can tie it back to what the original cue is.
Right. Exactly.
Because they should have a checklist. Because
you need something.
If I'm telling somebody to do the wrong thing to get them to do the right thing, then that could down the line end up becoming the wrong thing.
Yeah, too far in any direction is bad.
Yeah.
Right? So
but when you're pressed, you got an hour and a half or whatever.
No,
you got to get them right.
Yeah,
you got to get them right and make them so they can at least feel it. Because the thing with technique that I don't think people understand is when you hit it right, you're going to know you hit it right because it's going to feel fucking phenomenal. It's not going to feel uncomfortable.
It's great when...
Well, I take that back. It's going to be uncomfortable if you're not used to it.
I know, that caught me for a minute. I'm like, wait a minute.
I got to think about that.
I don't know,
spoke
Dave.
too soon. I spoke too soon. But when you hit it right, it's going to feel super light.
It is, yeah. And what's cool is in a seminar setting when you can get that to click.
Yeah.
You can't always. And it's okay if you can't always get that to happen. I think as long as you can provide them with what they need to be able to actually absorb it and do it correctly. And a lot of this stuff too, like with cueing, I've found, especially with, first of all, with the tremendous number in coaching hands-on in clinics and seminars in that setting, but also with like working with people for extended periods of time with online coaching, because I spend 3 or 4 hours a day watching video. I was doing it before. That's why I was trying to see how much time I needed, because I was doing it before I came here. So I spend a lot of time watching people move. And with the cues, like what I do is I'll watch their training, and then I'll prescribe what cues they need to really focus on for next time. And it can't be 10 things.
Yeah, it can't, no.
No, it's like, it's got to be like one major focus and then maybe something we've already been working on, So it'll be reinforce this cue. And I've seen people, I've seen it with my own eyes, where someone's squat is a mess. And with online coaching, with doing that sort of a technique with the cueing system and stuff, as something falls apart, fixing it, whatever, in the course of 6 months to a year, go from having a squat that is a mess to where everything is perfect, like where everything looks good. It's just it's a process. Sometimes it doesn't click like that. Sometimes it's about reinforcing, and the higher percentage training is tough for that because you only get a few shots. But with this, you get a lot. You get 15, 20 attempts at at performing a repetition that is in an effective stimulus range for strength, like between 75 and 85, and you're able to effectively implement those cues and make those movement corrections like you were saying earlier in the year, and you really have a whole mesocycle, a whole macrocycle to put that together. Sometimes the difference is, like, the amount that goes on the bar is inconceivable in 6 months, because it's not really just that they're stronger. It's that now they're able to maintain so much of a better mechanical position. That's the other side we get away from. It's not just about the strength stimulus. It's about if you can keep better positioning by becoming really proficient at the movement and really hammering those cues, staying on top of that, where in 6 months, not only are you making night and day improvement in strength, but that tech improvement is going to keep you safe too.
Yeah, and I think the something that people need to keep in mind when it's online, it's going to take longer. You know, this is if you're a coach, and the client needs to know this as well, to take accountability and responsibility. That, you know, if you got somebody in your own gym or somebody even in a seminar, you can kind of get them right probably within a week.
Yeah, I
mean, pretty damn quick.
Maybe in one day, session, but
and then you got because you can cue right there.
Right.
Not after the fact.
And you can say, are you doing it? You can see and make sure they're doing it, make corrections as you go, and kind of put hands on and adjust things. And that, like, when I have someone that's a long-time online person and they come to a seminar, every single time it's like, oh, there's some big thing that, like, that was so easy just to show you that.
Well, the coach has to have patience. I mean, both people have to have patience and understand it's going to take, technically it's going to take longer.
Oh, sure. And it's no doubt.
Most certainly going to take,
but the thing is, too, it's going to take a long time anyway.
Yeah.
You know, we might be able to make a quick change where it does click, but what's going to preserve that when they start loading again?
Yeah.
It just falls apart. You know what I mean? So having that accountability and reinforcement. People talk a lot of trash about online coaching.
Yeah.
It's a great deal.
Yeah.
That's why I keep it. I don't need to do it. I keep doing it because I actually like seeing that progress.
Yeah, I see I see the negatives compared to personal, you know, in person. But some people just don't have that ability to do it.
Right.
You know, so
if you got a crew to train with, sure, but I mean,
most people don't.
Places that they don't.
Yeah, most people don't. So you're providing guidance where guidance isn't otherwise being provided.
Right.
You know, so that falls back on how good is the coach.
And I got people that train with a crew.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That are still doing the coaching. They're still sending in the videos, and you know, they got 4 or 5 people on the mono with them.
Well, but what can happen in groups too is people take it for granted.
Yeah.
You know, and they're not constantly checking. You know I lay back a lot unless they're getting ready for a meet. You know, then I'll focus more when they're getting ready for the meet.
You grind them up more. Yeah, me too.
Pay more attention, and some of it's intentional, some of it's not.
Stuff,
yeah.
But if you're paying somebody,
if you're paying somebody, you got to be on point.
You get what you pay for. I mean, like, even if it's online, like there's a lot of benefits to it. There really are.
If the coach is good.
That's what I mean. Is that what sucks, and it's the same thing with seminars, dude. There's people like lighting their asses on fire, roller skating in the fucking squat rack, and pounding beers, and that's a seminar. And it's like, so people go to that once, and they're like, they don't want to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't understand that there are ones that are actually educational, like full day events.
Yeah, the problem is
like here, like the ones I do.
The problem is you get the coaches that are good, you know, like yourself. They're good. You know, they know that it takes longer. They know how to break it down into, like you said, just 1 or 2 cues. You know, where you get the ones that are not good. They're just looking to find a way to buy their test.
Personal trainers. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not time yet. The thing is, I think you need to have that hands-on. That's a good point. I think if you don't have a period where you're a hands-on instructor, you're in a position where you're either doing coaching or training people in person. Forget about online coaching. I don't care what your total is. You don't have the skill set because you need that first. And then you have to tackle the it's not a small task. You have to tackle the obstacle of actually translating all that and coming to putting tools together that'll help you, like the videos, the stuff I'm saying.
Yeah.
That was a process.
See, online you lose all nonverbal communication.
Right.
So you don't know, did they look like they wanted to train? You know, were they excited to train? Are they burned out? Are they tired? Are their eyes red? Are they white? You know, there's so many factors that get processed.
I do ask. I always say, like, give me feedback with each session. Like, if you slept in the car, I want to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. Yeah. I ask people that, and that's part of their homework. You know what I mean? I'll say, like, hey, I gotta know what's going on. Like, I don't need to know the gritty details, but like if your house flooded, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If your mom died, like probably those are the kind of things you want to let me know.
The global issue is you have to then compete against the people that are charging $10 a month.
Right.
You know,
Which is fine because it's a different service.
Yeah.
I hope people know if they come to me. Like, I
don't know
can't
if they
take
do.
people. I can't take people. That's the thing. Like, so when I go to take people, you're right. There is definitely confusion where there are people that think that probably I'm providing that same template service.
Yeah. You're going to get what you pay for.
That's fair, but like, it's hard to get in with me. You know what I mean? So the people that I take, like, I can't take people often. I have people that I've been working with since the last time we sat down and talked. You know what I mean? Like, this has been like 4 years, 3 years. The same people. You know, think about it. Most of them are still my roster.
Yeah.
So obviously there's something to it. But the ones that I do take, I probably have 10 or 12 that rotate in and out.
I think the mark of a good online trainer is when you ask them what their attrition rate is.
Right.
You know, you find it's like, oh, most people just train with me for 12 weeks and they're done.
Yeah.
I'm like, so you suck.
I don't want somebody for one mesocycle. Yeah. I don't want to invest in a person that I'm going to get that short of time with. You know what I mean?
Well, it's a different skill set because now
I'm getting to know you for that first meso. A lot of that is me observing how you're taking direction, how you're modifying stuff on the fly. I'm getting to know you as a lifter at that point. You know what I mean? And how you're able to take, like I said, what kind of feedback are you going to give me when I don't ask for it? You know, stuff like that. So I get to know the person, and that takes a little bit. You know, but I don't want to do that with someone who 8 weeks later is going to be gone. What's the point?
That's a lot of time.
I mean? Yeah, it's
a lot of upfront time.
I could have. The thing is, I charge, and that's another thing I do. It's a little different. I charge a little bit more for the first mesocycle.
Well, you should.
For that
reason. It takes longer.
And the subsequent ones they're a reduced rate, but that rate stays the same forever. But it's a little more for the first one because it's a lot more work. You know what I mean? It's a lot more.
Well, you have assessments and all the other stuff too.
Because I already got you on track after that. Now we're just this is changing. We can communicate. I'm teaching you how to communicate with me the first one.
Yeah. Well, a coach that's worth any weight is going to understand the lifetime value of a client, and they're going to realize that that's going to be more than one mesocycle or one training cycle and so forth. You know, if it's over 3 years, you would
hope it will be more than that. That's
I mean, how much does that income-wise over 3 years compounded? Right. You know, then you get to a point where you're at now where you don't have to take anybody.
No. And like when I do take somebody, that's one of the last things I touch on is like, how long are you planning to stay with me? And now I won't, if they say it's just one meso, I won't like get rid of them or cancel them, but I go into it preparing them to go off on their own, which is a whole different deal than preparing them to work with me for 8 weeks. You know what I mean? I'm setting you up now to get ready for this cycle we're going to do that's going to bring you into the meat, or I'm teaching you how to run the method. Yeah. A lot of times it's people that bought the book and they have the templates and they want like that hands-on. They want me to actually coach them through it once. Yeah. And I love doing those because I see those people a year, 2, 3 years later, and they're still killing it.
What's some of the most common issues that you see?
What type of issues?
With those coming in, with the new client coming in? Training issues, technique issues?
I mean, that's the least interesting aspect of it, I think, in terms of the issues that I see.
We'll hit that first because that's what everybody's going to wonder.
Okay, so common issues. Depth is always an issue in a squat, like with someone that's new. You know? Well, I don't want to say always because you have the random hypermobile person.
Most of the time.
Most of the time it's people that are also, ego is a huge issue. Stepping in the door because I feel like that may be more so for me than other people in terms of coaching because I feel like people are always trying to prove to me something. So they'll like fudge their numbers higher than they actually are. Stuff like that, you know, and I'm like, and that's why I encourage people. I'm like, why don't you let me set your training max based on, we'll do an Mrap and I'll use the coefficient chart that I made in my book. It's a good way to do it. You won't kill yourself that way. I think people really believe that if they put their training max 10 or 20 pounds higher, it's going to result in more of an adaptation, but it's just not. And if it was, then I would just move the percentages up. You think I wouldn't have figured that out by now? You know what I mean? Like I know what works. So, I mean, and honestly, you're better off to round them down. I actually just had somebody come back who had been with me for a long time. And she just was, I think she was bored and left for like a little bit. and came back, and that was exactly what I told her. She's like, I'm just not consistent with this other training. I'm not, I can't get back into my routine. It's been like 3 times I'm training in the last 3 weeks or something like that. And basically what she said was like, I'm not sure where my training maxes are. So I'm like, well, what are the numbers? What are the best numbers? And she gave me them. I'm just like, okay, so like subtract 20 from that, subtract 30 from that, subtract 15 from that.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do that.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's not going to make a big difference. It's not going to make any difference in outcome at all.
It may actually go up.
It'll probably help. Yeah, it'll probably help. That's why I'm not a fan. When people use terms like projected, that scares me. Like my projected maxes, I'm like, it sounds like a future goal more than an actual solid figure that we should be basing training on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like my hopes and dreams are very different from what I'm actually capable of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Most people.
While a different training methodology, when I was training with Louis years ago, I remember when I first came in, I had a 540, 520 raw bench, and we were doing speed work with 405. All right, so 70, 80%. And you can go back, and if you can find the old Powerlifting USAs, you can find the prescriptions for 70, 80%.
Yeah.
And my bench went up, and my speed training weight went from 405 all the way down to 185 with mini bands.
During that time, yeah.
Over the period of 10 years.
Yeah.
So, and people are like, what the fuck? Why is that? I'm like, well, if you go to a meet, this is exactly how it's happened over a period of all those years. You go to a meet and you kill a weight. All right. So, your third attempt is just smoke. Then you go back to the gym, and my old school before I used to, how I used to train before being around Louis was I could have done 50 pounds more. So when I do my next training cycle, I need to add that and then factor that into my percentages.
Just because it moved good.
Yeah. And then,
that's the best.
Yeah. Louis comes at me with, why don't you just use the same fucking weight and go back and get the 50 pounds?
Right.
And I'm like, oh, fuck, that makes sense. He said it lowers your risk of injury.
I mean, that's common. Yeah. I mean,
you would think it's common sense.
But in your head, you're like, nah, man, if I work harder, I'll get even more.
To me, I'm like, fuck that. I just did this. I need to use 85%. Right. Not less.
But less is actually, in that case, you have to ask yourself too. Whenever anybody asks me like, oh, well, what do I do for this? And it's like, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Because that's, you know what I mean? Are you trying to do actually speed work? Because like for me, like probably 70% is the upper end of speed work in that area, right? And like in the earlier version of the book, like in the OG templates, the old protocols, we don't use them as much anymore. But there was actually considered, that was speed work. Like if you were fist setting your squat, your deadlift would be speed work at 70%. So it would be 70% for like triples, and that would be progressive over the course of the mesocycle. But the goal is speed. So if it's not fast enough, that would be an issue. But yeah, you can go that high for speed work. Like it's crazy because I think a lot of people think that speed work ends at 50%. I'm like,
it's intent. I mean, and everybody's going to be different.
Right.
I think that's people need to understand speed work's still technical work too.
Right.
So if it's too light, your lift is going to look like shit. It's not going to look like when you bench. If it's too heavy, it's not going to look like when you compete either.
Also the ballistic reversal aspect of it too, like especially with bench speed work. I mean, there's something that's irreplaceable. You know what I mean? I even train that into the heavier volume that we do. We emphasize that. The ballistic reversal, like treating it like speed work. Moving like maximal force to a submaximal weight.
All weight should move that way.
Right.
It's just some people don't get it.
Right. They don't try to control it.
Yeah, they don't understand that you need to have maximal intent, when lifting a weight. And, it's, again, you think it's common sense, but it's not.
I think when you're so immersed in this stuff like we are, Dave, you know what I mean? It's common sense. Granted. It's common sense to us, but maybe not to people that, you know what I mean? No.
Josh, we have any questions that came in?
Yeah, we got a handful from the live stream here. Do you program your speed squats and speed deads on the same day? We'll give that to you, Swede. I don't know if you already covered that. If so, I apologize.
Well, we don't necessarily do...
Yeah, you don't do speed work.
We don't necessarily do speed work for those, but if you were doing the OG templates, like the original protocols for fist set, it will be on a separate day, and you would either be deadlift or squat would be the speed, would be designated for speed training. So it would be one or the other. But no, it wouldn't be on the same day.
Okay. You might not be able to answer this without seeing it, but ask it anyway. How do you correct someone's squat form when their knees shoot forward extremely and can't keep a good shin angle or sit back?
You want me to take that?
Yeah.
Okay. So when someone's having an issue with that, they probably need a little bit more external rotation of femur, right? So I would cue them to open the knees, maybe even put more emphasis or a little bit more pressure on the lateral heel, which will make that a little bit easier for them to do. And what that'll do is actually bring the knee up higher instead of further forward, which will make it easier for them to reach depth. So even though the hips could be in the same position, just by making that change, that's the difference between depth and no depth.
Yeah, I think that's a key point, is to realize that if the knee's going forward, it's harder to break depth. The extreme of that is a sissy squat.
Right.
You know, you never break depth on the sissy squat, ever.
No matter what.
You know, and there's a
down.
fuck ton of motion.
Yeah.
You know, and the other opposite extreme would be your knee being behind your heel, which now you're going to fall over.
Right, yeah.
So
that's
that's
like a box squat exclusive movement.
Yeah.
It happens though. I see people do it where they're actually on the box and
the
shins are tilted back.
Yeah. I mean,
not much carry over there.
No, it's great for developing the posterior chain.
Sure.
But it should be viewed as a supplemental type exercise.
I agree.
You know, and kind of going from there. But, and there, some people do, you know, with raw, you see, at least I see, the shin angle of the knee, typically with wraps, you might see stacked over the heel or midfoot. It kind of ranges right around there. Sleeves, it goes a little forward more.
Yeah.
So midfoot to toe.
Well, I think people are fighting for that midfoot.
Yeah.
But they get pushed back. So it's just a matter of really having that control on the external rotation of the femur. Like, so learning how to open up. And we do that in, see, one of the other benefits to doing all that volume in an effective strength stimulus range is that we're using, like when we use wrap numbers, for example, and those mesocycles that are like immediate before a meet, they're doing like their wrapped volume. You know what I mean? So these guys are doing 75 to 80% wrapped for a tremendous number of reps. So to be able to drill that and really develop that aspect of the lift, which that's specific training. You know, if you want to get that carryover out of the wraps, which I'm all about milking every pound you can get out of those fucking things. If you're going to be in that division, like, you should probably get every single bit you can get out of them. You got to really learn how to use them. And what ends up happening is people are doing like 3 total sets a week wrapped. And you're not
last
gonna,
3 weeks.
You're not going to get good that way. You know what I mean? Even if they're wrapping it, like you said, sometimes it's the last 3 weeks. Sometimes it's people that are just doing, you know, different types of training, so they're not wrapping very often. But that's just hugely important to have that specific thing where you're like actually training that, because it does change. It doesn't necessarily change the strength curve, it flattens it a little bit, you know, because where it normally would be by far the most difficult portion of the movement, you're getting a shitload of assistance from those wraps.
Yeah.
But that focus has to go somewhere else, which is controlling the wraps and keeping them open. It's not like it's easy then.
Yeah, you've been around fucking forever, so you'd remember this. I mean, the old school rule was nothing over 405. You know, 405 is when you start wrapping.
Right.
You know, and then if you were training for a meet, you know, wraps would start, say, 10, 12 weeks out.
Right.
And then briefs and wraps would be like 8 weeks out.
Progressive.
Yeah. And then suit bottoms, briefs, wraps, last 6 weeks. And then, say, last 4 weeks, you know, suit, briefs, wraps. So it all kind of progressed. But you always started with the wraps.
I think a lot of people, and the same thing happened with bench too. You would bench raw.
Yeah.
And then gradually, you know, move into it. And like, I think a lot of people didn't understand how strong people were raw.
Yeah. Yeah.
During that era. Like, there were numbers that were insane.
Well, most of the training was raw. You know, even if they used progressive overload, you know, a Western model, the whole off season was nothing. You know, the wraps, the gear was only used maybe the last 6 weeks, and the gear wasn't that good. The reason why I started with wraps 12 weeks out, because they fucking hurt more than anything else.
Yeah.
So it took a few weeks to get used to that sweet pain or whatever it fucking sucks. It's not even sweet pain the first week. It just sucks.
Nah.
Then you get used to it, and then you can crank the fuckers. I remember when I went to Westside, we didn't use wraps at all until the meet. Then I got to the meet, I'm like, fuck this shit. This fucking hurts. Don't put them on that. And I didn't need them because we sit back so far. You know, so
I got these guys doing 5 wrap sets
per
session.
I mean, if you're used to it, it's no big deal.
Well, that's how you get used to it.
That's how you get used to it real
That's how
quick.
you get used to it.
Yeah.
You don't have any issues after that. Like, they're like, it's no big deal to wrap for, when it's time to get wrapped in the meet, they're like, murder me, because they've done hundreds of wrap jobs going into the meet. You know what I mean? Not only that, you become masterful with that gear. You want to get good at something, you got to do the thing.
Well, you got to learn too that, say, if it's wraps, does one wrap style work better than another? Well, you need experience to know if one style works better than another.
Yeah.
You know,
and I think also too, a lot of it is that people think that there's some like magic pattern of twisting or like crisscrossing wraps that's going to change the physics of it, you know, which is essentially you're just deforming an object that has an elasticity rating, which essentially is like a value that signifies how much a material can be deformed and still return to its initial state, you know, to its initial shape. So that is like a conduit for elastic potential energy, right? Which is what kinetic energy is stored as it reverses to shoot back up the rest of the movement. So in the mechanical system of the squat, that's what that is. That's just physics expressing. It's much better now. You would still have that elastic potential energy in your tendons and soft tissue and so forth if you weren't wearing wraps, but you wouldn't be able to use anywhere near as much of it. So that's why the stuff with the higher elasticity rating works better. Yep. So the objective should be to get as many passes as possible, as close as possible to being the limit of deformation, but not going over it. So really, however you make that work, there's a lot of different ways to do it. I've seen a lot of people do really well with the crisscross method, that stuff.
Well, the tensile strength of the wrap is a factor too. Where at one point
if it starts to tear.
Yeah, at one point in time, I think we had 13 different wraps, and I had them all tested using Instron tensile strength, you know, to kind of rank, here's this one to this one.
Is that when they tear?
Yeah, and none of ours tore, but I mean, it goes through 3,000 revolutions.
Micro damage or something, right?
Yeah, but there's a point where it breaks, you know, but nobody's going to wrap, you know, to that extent. And we were just looking at how long they'll last, you know, as far as
how many,
you know, stretch to maximum, how many times wraps we'll use before, you know,
that's interesting,
before it sucks. But the factor that you can't test with that, because that gives you a guideline. Well, here's the strongest one, here's the weakest one, and you kind of know just by fucking feeling it.
Right.
You know, there's some you're like, I don't know where this fits because it's so close. But when you start adding sweat and chalk, and you know, even different people's sweat's got different properties in the sweat
and the chalk, and that's getting
and dirt and shit like that. It gets in the material, it breaks down the material. So that's kind of like the untestable factor.
That's true. Yeah. In terms of like, you're talking like numbers of times you can wrap with a given wrap.
And if you pre-roll, say like the crates, if you just take them out and roll them yourself and put them on, you're not going to get that many revolutions.
Right.
Now, if you take it to a lay and you pre-roll it, you know, to maximum, you'll get one fucking wrap out of it. You'll get a lot of rotations, but then you're never going to be able to stretch it that hard. To roll it again.
Right.
Where that's kind of the trick to getting the most out of the strongest wraps is either have some strong wristed grip motherfucker.
I agree. You got pre-roll
that can pre-roll it. Like even all wraps should be pre-rolled.
Like if you, I mean, like the machine, you can get fucking insane tension on it, and then it's so much easier to apply for the person that's rapping. Yeah, because you're just kind of unrolling it instead of actually.
See, the thing that used to crack me up is the whole casting and rebound shit, and I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I can make a rebound wrap casted. And I can make a casted wrap rebound.
Max out the tightness.
It's like, what the fuck kind of sales bullshit is this?
Right. It's sales bullshit. You just said it. That's exactly what it is.
You know?
Like, what's that yellow, the javelin, right?
Yeah.
If I had that material just in a regular knee wrap, I could probably murder somebody with that. Would they get a lot of carry over it? Probably not. But the point is, like, it's because it's so flexible, because it's so easy to yank it, it's extremely painful if you get that tight. So it gives the same feeling of something that's going to give you a whole lot of carryover. But, like, you know, for someone who's squatting 900 pounds, probably not the thing you would pick.
Yeah. I've always said, you know, if it sounds like a sales pitch, probably is.
Yeah. And you know this. It's all like this neurolinguistic programming. It's just marketing. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's fine.
We got a little off topic on that one, Josh.
That's all right.
That's okay.
You guys can both answer this one. Is there any different cues you would give someone that has to switch from a deadlift bar to a stiff bar for the deadlift?
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so first thing I would do, the main difference is, you know, that you're not going to be able to take the slack as easily with a stiff bar compared to a deadlift bar, obviously the term stiff bar. But I actually tell people to try and put the emphasis on taking the slack. if they have to switch to a stiff bar from a deadlift bar, if they're traveling, just tell them put all the focus on taking the slack so we can maintain that good starting position, you know. And usually, like, and for me, like when I'm warming up, even if it's a stiff bar, even if it's a deadlift bar, it'll be kind of, the plates will be hovering up to 405. You know what I mean? Like before I initiate, like I'm actually packing the scaps, get myself in position before I actually initiate the pull. The plates are like a little off the ground. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so kind of setting it up like that as they warm up, I have them emphasize that and just kind of put all the focus on getting a good starting position in the initiation, making sure that you have the slack. It's not going to look the same, but you know, I mean, you still have to do that first. That needs to be the main thing, because otherwise every repetition is going to look insane because they're going to start different.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that some people aren't pulling enough to have slack anyhow.
Right.
You know,
right.
so it takes 495 or so.
Like they're not going to notice any difference. That's what I mean. Like we were saying, the 405. Like if it's somebody that's pulling, like what if I could only pull 405?
There's no slack. You know,
there's no slack. Yeah.
Where I've had luck telling people to listen for the click, because there's a little bit of a click, and it's more so on a straight bar than it is the deadlift bar. But the other thing,
the click, like pulling the bar up into
you
where
hear
it
the
touches.
bar. Yeah,
that's a good
you
idea.
hear it a little bit, and the other thing too is it quiets them a little bit. So you know, some people do really well if they get super jacked up and pull, you know, really psyched up. Most don't. Most it's the body position out of the bottom is so critical that most people fuck it up when they get too fired up.
That's why we do that checklist, man.
Yeah.
Because it's not about like beating your head into the wall or attacking the bar all crazy and reaching down and grabbing and ripping it. It's about getting into position and starting.
Yeah, it's hard to listen for a click if you're fucking off in La La
Out
Land.
of your mind, yeah. Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So I've had luck with that.
I use the slack term. I like using the cue to take the slack.
No, I think it's critical that you use that.
But the reason that I like it, even when you can't necessarily see slack in the bar, is because there's slack in you. There's slack in your arms.
Good point.
There's slack in your back. So we're taking all the slack. Like, so you think about your arms like ropes.
Yeah.
If you're initiating the movement and they're still loose, it's going to catch, and that's how those biceps fly off the bone. I've seen it happen way too many times.
Yeah, that's a great point.
You know what I mean? So having that slack, at least everything's preloaded, and you have a fair shot at getting a good start.
I'm going to steal that, because the slack is more than just the bar.
It is.
I've always known that. I just never put it together. You know, it's like get tight, you know, but you took two things and put it in one cue. Yeah. You know, which is better for that checklist that you're talking about.
Should fix everything. The idea is for me to get it as streamlined as possible, so we can have as little communication as necessary and get as much information across as possible.
That's great, because you don't have to fucking talk to people.
Well, I got to narrow it down. That's what I mean. I'm very introverted, Dave. You know what I mean?
How can I come up with a system of coaching that I don't have to say shit?
This extroversion is an act. I want to be left alone. I hide. So like it's as minimal, the least effective interaction as possible. Minimum necessary force. You know. That's my theory.
What we got next?
Do you use Prilipin's chart for older lifters? If not, how do you use metrics for programming intensity and volume, not just the subjectivity of recovery?
True.
Yeah, so we do use Prilipin, and the reason that we're using Prilipin, we're using it indirectly. Put it that way. Everything satisfies Prilipin. Everything that we do satisfies Prilipin. So in other words, if you just look at the main work in fifth set, we've met the requirements for a strength adaptation according to Prilipin before you finish your main work, before you even move on to the MSM. And the beauty of that is that's all you need for the adaptation. Could you benefit from more? Maybe, but then it's a risk-reward situation of, is it worth risking injury to get what might be only 5% more adaptation? And normally I would say no, but since we're able to correct by removing the most dangerous portions of the range of motion, like with a board press, where does all injury happen usually? On overall bench press, at the chest or on the reversal, right? So if we can avoid that by using a board, it allows you to maintain basically the same movement pattern, okay? And that's what we shoot for too. That's another thing I'm really big on when I have people doing rack pulls, for example. What position would you be in at that portion of the pull? That's how I want you to initiate the rack pull, because it's real easy to lean back on the bar and rack pull 900 pounds.
Leg press it.
Yeah, exactly. But can you finish a deadlift from that position? And that's the goal. And, you know, obviously initiating from that position is more difficult than starting from the floor in a lot of cases.
Yep.
But, yeah, I mean, maybe you can move more weight. I think people, it's less than they think they're going to be able to, you know, and that's why I use a percentage that's based on the full range of motion lift for the rack pulls, because I don't want them trying to do some crazy rack pull max, and it's another variable I got to fuck with later. Forget that.
Unless it's a really, really high rack, it's not going to be over what their 1 rep max is.
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
But, you know, we do actually, there is one mesocycle where I allow people to pull from right at the knees or out just above the knees. That's farthest away from the meat. But that's for like more repetitions, and it's an interesting way to develop it. It seems to work very well. But yeah, so
Yeah.
did I answer that? I'm not even sure
Yeah, I
if I
think
answered
so.
the question. Okay.
All right, another programming one here. Dave, what do you or it says Dave, but Swede, you can answer this as well.
Okay.
What do you think about squat, deadlift, bench 1 time a week with high volume and progressive intensity increase throughout the program?
I'll flip it over to Swede because I'm here I do these every week, you know, so he's not here all the time. So I'll let him take that.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I do. That's exactly what I do. So you just described my training.
Good answer. I'm just going to read these because some of them are kind of silly, but
Okay.
I'll blast through them. Well, this one says, please stop spending so much time on your body. It's narcissistic and very unattractive.
Fine.
I don't know who that's.
Okay.
I don't know.
You
who
haven't
that's-
even
it's
seen my
probably
body,
towards
dude.
Dave.
Don't
Thank
judge
you.
my body. You haven't even
Yeah.
seen it.
Thank you.
All right, on to the
That
next.
was Dave. Was that you? I'm sorry. Never mind.
Yeah, whatever. I just, you know, thank you. Your comments are noted.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much success have you seen with your 1 week program compared to your original 5th set programs?
With my 1 week program?
I think that was for Dave. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's not for me.
With my 1 week program?
Yeah, so how much success have you seen with your 1 week program compared to your original 5th set programs is how he worded it.
What's your 1 week program?
I don't have a 1 week program.
I was a little confused about that. Well,
I would like to find a 1 week program.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm not aware of any 1 week program.
all right, that answers it.
No, that would be a poor program. I think that would not be a program as much as it would be like the high school method.
Yeah, I'm
Where
not
you
sure
just
what you get out of that.
Go in and do whatever you want. It's 1 week.
All right, here's a real question. How close do you put AMRAPs in leading up to a meet? So how far out from a meet?
Okay, so the last AMRAP that somebody would do foreseeably running 5th set, say they would run in the MSM sequence system, it's going to be roughly 45 days out from the meet. Because 44 will be the soonest. Will be the soonest that we would begin the peak. So 45 would be the latest that we would probably be doing an additional session. So, yeah, that would end the normal training that involves AMRAPs and so forth.
When's the last heavy training
Okay, so
on average?
the first 3 mesos, well, we can break it down pretty easily. The first 3 microcycles, right? So that's 27 days. They all involve over 90% training.
Leading up to the meet?
Well, yeah, so that's the first 27 days
Okay,
of a
I got it.
44-day peak. So the rest of that is essentially like after that we have a week or a microcycle, which is a 9-day microcycle, where we're doing only 80% for 3 singles with full commands. It's just like practice. But really we're just reducing fatigue, and that's enough to preserve the adaptations we have. So fatigue starts to sort of nosedive there, and what's crazy is a phenomenon we've noticed there where people feel like shit that week. That's the worst they ever feel. We call it like the death march, where like doing a single with 80% sucks. And it just seems to be an aspect of the transmutation of like that adapting from doing all that volume to doing a really higher intensity and much less work. As that fatigue nosedives, they feel like shit for about a week. Then we do speed work at about 6 days out and nothing after that. So after that 6 days out session, typically you feel like God. Everything's flying. But regardless, the day of the meet, by then, everybody's ready to go. I mean, unless you got the flu or something, you're probably going to be ready to go boar hunting with your fists by the time.
I think the important thing to note is, you know, looking at all programming from a global perspective, you know, it is all about managing fatigue, you know, so your last squat, your last deadlift, or your last bench is going to be heavily dependent upon what the training was to get to that last session. So if somebody's fatigue management is based upon squatting 3 times a week. They can't stop squatting 21 days out. You know, they're going to have to keep doing that because they're
Maybe not squatting altogether 21 days out. Yeah.
Their recovery is going to be a little different because their accumulation and how they respond from their training to that is different. So,
Sure.
you know, if somebody's squatting max effort and dynamic, you know, and that they're doing a la West Side conjugate, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be a different peak than what you would use for 5th set or Boris Shiko would use for Shiko.
Isn't it pretty similar though?
It's close, but
So like what is, like, for example, like say 3 weeks out from West Side, what would you do there?
probably the last heavy pull.
Right. Okay. So that's every pull.
Last heavy pull. Last heavy
then
squat
what's
might be
left?
2 weeks. Actually,
Okay.
probably 3.
Okay.
You know, it really, a lot of it, though, depends upon the skill set of the lifter.
Okay.
The more advanced the lifter, the longer duration they're going to need before the meet. A beginner who really doesn't even know how to neurally lift the weight, you know, they can't mentally, you know, just from a psychological standpoint, you take them off the heavy stuff 2 weeks out, they're going to lose confidence.
That's what happens. It's always their mental midgets.
Yeah, so it's
You know what
it's
I mean?
just a
It's
matter
people
of
that have
having
issues,
trust.
Yeah, the trust. So what I do is, like, I take that out of it. You don't have the option.
Yeah.
And the way we have it, it's a pretty generalized approach. But I mean, I have people that use this peak that don't even use the method successfully, and they still do pretty well with the attempt selection protocols with those formulas. You know, it was real simple. It was just like a regression, looking at all the different numbers and all the performances, and then we continued to check that out. And then after the first book, so many more people were doing it that had never done it before. And that allowed me to see there was some deviation on the 3rd attempt bench press. So I was like, all right, well, this is more than I would consider to be acceptable. So we played with a couple of different numbers, and it looked like when we put the upper limit at 102.5% on the 3rd for bench, that fixed it. And we watched that for about 2 years before I put the evolutions out. And that was where we changed those numbers. And so much better. No issues. Everything's pretty much across the board now with the 104, 102.5, 104. For people running the method, it's going to work. It's the
So what do you say to the
have.
people that want more than 4%? It's like, I want to do
Keep
this.
training. What the fuck?
I'm just putting my head in.
But that's not to say you can't get more than 4. You can't get more than 4% every 6 months at all, because you have the opportunity to test. It's just put the fuck up. You show up.
Yeah.
You see if you can execute more, then you can get that, and then 4% more in the meet.
Well, I think that's where the AMRAPs serve their purpose in your program.
It keeps
Because
people from going ape shit. And I
Yeah.
think another part that I wanted to touch on when you were talking about peaking with conjugate is that you guys are doing pretty similar to a peak all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's such a dramatic difference for me. I think that's why we're able to be so consistent with the effect, because we're doing that. We're all coming from. So there is like a repotentiation effect to doing a period of volume, right? So that when you switch back to the higher intensity, it works again really well. And that's another benefit to doing it this way. So there may be some effect on your end, and I don't know, I'm speculating. There may be some effect when you're doing conjugate where you're already doing all the 90s. So you do need more to stay closer to the meet, to maintain that adaptation, to maintain that level, you know, of capacity, to maintain that. It might die off a little quicker. I mean, who knows? I don't know that for a fact, but you're saying that you've run into that. I don't really run into it with my stuff, but that's not to say that I wouldn't run into it with that.
Well, the thing with, and I'm talking conjugate outside of West Side,
Yeah.
you know, because Louis kind of got more control. You know,
Right,
'cause
he's
in
running
there.
it,
You know,
yeah.
if somebody knows what they're doing, they're not going to run into the same issues.
Right.
A lot of people just, they overextend themselves on max effort work, which
That's
that's
100%.
what
legit.
kills them, where it's a competitive, it's a training max. It's not a competitive max. You don't need to get all fucking psyched up, because that can add 5%.
Sure.
You know, getting psyched up, ammonia, all this other shit.
Yeah,
you know,
ammonia every time. You're
taking
right, yeah.
fucking bute and all this other shit for a max effort day, you know, then it actually becomes a competition, and a competition is really hard to recover from.
Right. I mean, it's so taxing.
Yeah. So
In-
it's
in
not
terms of-
training, it's competing every week, which that's going to just put your dick in the dirt.
And it's crazy because it's not even really that you're accumulating a shitload of central fatigue, which is the type that we accumulate like over the course of a long macro cycle. But when you're doing that much, it's almost like it's acute. It's almost like a trauma. And it takes a while to recover
Yeah.
from that. You know, when you push yourself so far beyond your normal limits with doing things like ammonia and all the other psychs and all the other, like you said, butte. You're like
everything. I mean, it's
you look like a bag of milk. You know
as an intermediate or an advanced lifter, the hardest thing for them to really understand, and they will if they stay around long enough. The healthiest lifter wins.
That's it. The one that's still standing.
It's not always the strongest, because the strongest will fuck up, get burned out, get hurt, strain, pull something. Everybody who's competing in the meet at a high level is hurt.
Right.
Everybody.
They're mitigating.
So
that's all they're trying to do is mitigate that injury some way, keep it from getting worse so you can finish. Yeah.
The person that's hurt the least is usually the one that wins.
And the reason that we do so good is because we start playing that get hurt the least game 6 months out.
Yes.
You know what I mean? The idea is that my whole system is set up. Like there's a whole chapter called Risk Factors for Injury. I actually present and lecture on risk factors for injury like probably at least 20 times a year, at different seminars where that'll be the presentation I do. And I go through down a list of different things and how this is an issue for competitive powerlifters. This is how we deal with it in fifth set. This is an issue for competitive powerlifters. This is how we deal with it. This is what I suggest. So there's stuff you can do outside the method, but the method itself prevents a lot of overuse injuries, which are a huge thing. A lot of technical injuries because of the cueing system and stuff that we're doing. And I'm actually putting together, we have a really solid system of like, this is the issue, this is the error in technique. Here's how we fix it with this cue or with these series of cues. So you have to, if there's a problem, it's a complex problem. It might be like first this, then this, then this. And that'll fix it, and it does. And I've been working on putting together like a textbook for that because I want to do a real certification course. Like I want to do like a coaching cert that's just for fifth set. So it's not like, which I'm not, in terms of generalized audience, I don't really care about that.
Well, I mean, the problem you're going to run into is you're going to have other coaches using your stuff with their clients.
Well, I do. There's probably 50 of them, Dave. That's what I'm saying. And none of them are certified. So the problem is they're saying they're a fifth set coach and then
dilute your brand.
I had a girl show me, she's like getting coached by a guy who's a fifth set coach and show me a template and it's like not even fifth set. Like some of the stuff is there, but a little piss in the whiskey, like you might not taste it, but I promise it's better without it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's made that way for a reason. There's a reason for every aspect of it. So I'd like to teach other people to be able to teach it. You know what I mean? To be able
it controls your brand identity too.
Yeah, and you can count on that because there are people that know fifth set works really well because they see all the people doing it. And they're like, okay, well, I got a local coach that does it. I'm going to work with him. He may or may not know what he's talking about. And then there was others I had issues with big name lifters, like it's their coaching, hashtag their coaching. And you can see the programming because the person's posting it, and it's fifth set. Yeah. And I would like to be able to be like, hey, like, why don't you find like a certified fifth set coach, like someone that actually was trained in this stuff by me, that actually passed the qualifications to understand, like, this is how you fix this issue. This is how you run this program. Because the books are out, and the first one's a methodology. All the questions should be answered with that. And then the hows and whys and the reasons and how we got there is all in the second book. So if somebody reads all that, they should be able to help, but they may not. So having some sort of testing, and I'm not going to do anything too crazy with it. Like it'd be like a 2-day thing, something like that. But I'd rather than doing the seminars, I'd like to do those 3 or 4 times a year because, honestly, like I want fifth set to live forever. I'm not going to do coaching forever.
Yeah.
I'm not going to work with 30 people forever.
Well, I mean, you're already turning people away too.
Right, that's what I mean.
So you need to have people you can refer people out.
Funnel it down to people that I know are good.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That I can count on and give a referral to because I've had issues with referring to people before.
Oh, I know all about that.
So I don't do it anymore. I don't refer to anyone. I'm like, nah, I don't know any other coaches that are good. I'm sorry. It sucks, but it is what it is. Better than dealing with it after the fact.
Yep.
But,
what we got next?
All right. Should you do program deload week if you still feel strong?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Is this on? Yes.
Yeah, we don't even need to go into that. Just yes.
Absolutely.
Anybody you talk to that's worth their weight is going to tell you the same thing.
Yeah. I don't care how you feel. I mean, I want to know if you're destroyed.
Yeah. But
you feel good. I'm like, okay, that doesn't really matter. We're gonna do what we know is logically the next right move. I
will add to that if you're auto-regulating your training, which I believe everybody should do at a certain point, you need to know when to back down You know, just because your training tells you that you need to do 80% for 5 or whatever it is, if it's not there, you know, try to force it. You know, I do believe in that. Try to force it to make sure you're just not being a coward on the day, a coward for the day. But if it's not there and you can't pull your ass out of it, just leave it for another day.
That's why it's so easy. Like, I'm so glad that we have this to the point where everything works as well as it does with this, because that's like a nightmare situation for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I would do, like how I would reconcile myself to not being able to do what I knew I was supposed to do for my training that day.
Oh, that's a bitch, but
That
I mean,
made me,
that's,
like,
you have to, you know.
Yeah, but like when you have a little bit of leeway there,
Yeah.
just get it done. Like, and that's what it is. Like, it's still hard. Another interesting phenomenon I've noticed with doing things this way, and I have a theory about what's going on. I think there's sort of a neural adaptation that's happening within the workout. Because people that are in later mesocycles, carrying more fatigue, obviously, they start the session, and like, let's say we'll use bench because it's everybody's favorite example. They'll start the session with, like, you know, they're over 80, whatever, over 80%. And that can look like some pretty heavy numbers, you know? And maybe the bar's moving really slow. And what I hear from people and what I've experienced myself in that situation at that point in a macrocycle is that it feels like the weight feels unbelievably heavy, you know? So I'm perceiving it to be really heavy. But by doing repeated efforts at that same percentage, the second set looks better, and the third set looks better and feels better. And by the fourth set, it's flying. You know what I mean? So you do somewhat adapt, which is beneficial because it prepares you for that AMRAP. So the AMRAP, you might not get as many reps as you would have got if you didn't do anything earlier or prior, but they're definitely better reps, especially if you're queuing the whole time. So again, when it comes down to getting like 8 reps at over 80% or 6 reps at over 80%, and they're good reps, like you're queuing, you're reaching, you know, you're able to maintain thoracic extension, all that stuff's happening, you know, that we're trying to develop, you're building that up. You're building that capacity up. You know what I mean? By doing that, by surviving that long and not having breakdown. Because once we have breakdown, that's usually when I end the AMRAP. That's what I recommend. Yeah. So if there's any tech breakdown, like stop. You probably could have got 2 more reps, but stop. Because they're going to be, like if you're doing, for example, if you're doing 8 reps and 6 of them are good and 2 of them are shit, 25% of your training is training, you know, shit.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, so we keep it all good. And I found you can actually survive longer in the set without breakdown with higher percentages by having those precedent sets, those earlier sets. They actually help. They kind of set you up for it, and it like corrects for fatigue. So like you said, you might go into the session feeling like you ain't even gonna be able to finish. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, I'm gonna get 1 on my AMRAP. And I get 7, you know, because by the time I'm at that, it's like, all right, everything's ready. That fatigue is kind of, it affects you in a number of ways, not just performance, but also like mentally. You know, that's a factor, and that's a lot of that is the issue that I have with like RPE based systems, is that a lot of people doing them are beginners, and you're asking somebody, hey, how hard was that on, like, can you just break that down, like, you know, microscopically to how difficult that was? Maybe, you know, like, oh, that was a 7, that was an 8. For someone that's trying to learn how to squat, which like,
well, I mean, what's the difference in their mind between 7 and 9?
Right, and the thing is too, like, those are the people that, like, I know a lot of them, they're the ones that are really pushing that type of stuff and like trying to really, you know,
fine-tune,
micromanage every aspect of their training. And it's like, you got a lot of training to do before you need to worry about that. Like,
a lot.
You don't even know what RPE 8 is.
Yeah, like 10 years.
You know what I mean? Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like, oh, I've been training for 4 years for power. I've done 8 meets. And it's like, okay, well, in 10 more years, you'll probably be at the point where you're in touch enough to be able to do that. And there are some people who, like, you know, God bless them, who are just amazing from the door and can do amazing things, like Chris Duffin.
You know, that's rare, though.
Duffins, people like that, where they actually have that sort of control. You know, but that's rare. Like you said, that's the outlier.
Yeah.
We don't appeal to the outlier.
Yeah. Well, Chris is a kind of a different breed there, too, because he has that, but then he works really hard and he puts a lot of intelligence in what he's doing.
No doubt he's possessed with it.
That's a rare breed.
Yeah,
because usually you'll get somebody that's, you know, has that genetic type potential, but they don't have that thirst for knowledge like Chris does to keep trying.
He's even more of an outlier.
Even more, way more.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I want to go back and unpack this Mrap thing because you made a statement which really stood out to me because it exposes where most people fuck up when they're doing Mraps, and that is making sure each repetition is technically proficient. Because in my experience with people doing Mraps, like, okay, it's my Mrap set, fucking turn everything off and just go. And that is the complete opposite of what you just stated.
That's detraining.
Which I think it's vital to unpack that and discuss it a little bit because you can, as you just said, you can take all the quality reps that you just did before that set and fuck it all up.
Totally.
Just by being a Tasmanian devil.
And it's the thing is, what sucks is you're doing it under the color of progress. Like, you think you're doing the right thing. You're like, okay, I'm working hard. This is like, I'm demonstrating work ethic. I'm putting my due diligence in by pushing as hard as I can on this and not being a pussy and not quitting. And it's like, well, okay.
But isn't it harder to do it technically proficiently?
But do the checklist every rep.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's harder though.
And I want to see it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
that's
it's harder. So in their excuse of training hard, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm like, well, then if it's, if you can get 7 that way, I'd rather you get 5 the right way.
Yeah. So what they're doing is they think they're making it harder, but they're taking the easy way out.
Right. Well, it's ego. Mm-hmm. They don't want to say they only got 5.
Ego don't matter on the platform.
That's what I mean.
The weight don't give a fuck about your ego.
It really don't matter. in training, it really doesn't matter.
No.
That's the thing. Like, it's what possible effect could you're getting 5 or 7, what difference is that going to make? Now, I do have people shoot for the PR. And the reason for that is I want them to put their all into it. But I put some contingencies on that, too. It's not, that's it. I would, Amgrap doesn't sell. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound good. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it would be Amgrap instead of Amrap, as far as I'm concerned. But Amrap was already a thing. So, but yeah, like.
Well, that's a conversation right there. What if you have the person that hits a growth spurt, which strength isn't always linear. It's not always 1 or 2%. It's sometimes out of nowhere. Here comes 30 pounds on your bench, but you had 3 years of no progress.
And you can see usually where that comes from if you look at it. If you break it down and analyze it, it's usually something. Maybe like their tech really improved.
So do you adjust the program from then or still stay with what the goals are of the cycle?
Do you mean in terms of...
If they start just...
Mid-macro cycle?
Yeah, just blowing up. Just state of the plan.
State of the plan, because it's not going to blow up that much.
Yeah.
How much is it going to blow up? What, you think they're going to put 20 pounds on the lift, 30 pounds? Okay, how much is that going to affect the percentage on the bar? It's negligible.
Not much.
5 pounds total over them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, when you look at it that way, so like, let's just say somebody put 30 pounds on their lift, right? If you end up doing the math, like, it's really not a big deal to put 30 pounds on your training max in terms of how much that affects the weight on the bar with 75% or 80%. Yeah. Which all that matters are those starting figures, because we're progressive anyway. We're adding weight every week anyway.
Yeah.
So it really is kind of irrelevant. It's like we were talking about fudging the training maxes down. Is that going to hurt? No. No more than it's going to hurt somebody who's already adapted. They're still going to continue to adapt. You're still well within meeting the prep and stuff and exceeding it. So it still works. It's never not worked. I have had people who put like 60 pounds on a lift in 6 months, and you're like, by the end, they're doing like 18 rep AMRAPs. But okay.
It's all right.
It's okay. Yeah,
they're growing.
What does that hurt? Yeah,
just to me, it tells me their technique was a little off. It came into focus.
Something happened.
They got stronger.
You can pick what it is. You can usually, if you look back, because I usually do after a macro, after someone does a meet, if they had some crazy, of course, I'm like, what was it that made that crazy?
Yeah.
And then I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, he kind of didn't know how to fucking bench before this, and that's why he was strong. He was benching for something, but he really was like flat on his back, and he wasn't. You know what I mean? So like, it's a tech thing. That makes up for it. It's not that they just adapted out of nowhere all of a sudden crazy.
It's almost always technical.
It's something.
Always.
Yeah, you're right. It's always technical. That's why when people talk about weak points in the lift, I'm like, I'm always skeptical. I'm always, you need more triceps. Maybe not.
Yeah. I've always said the sticking point is usually physical, technical, or mental, and everybody wants the physical answer.
Right.
Like what exercise do I need to do to increase my bench? What exercise do I need to go fix my lockout?
Yeah, what program should I do to get really strong? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
do you know how to lift?
Learn how to fucking bench. Learn how to squat. It's amazing what they'll fucking do.
Right.
It's the outlier that you look at and say, oh, you know what? Your upper back is falling out. You're not able to keep that where it needs to be. But usually you're not able to keep it in position.
But if you take, usually like in that case, what you're talking about, if you take a look at the global picture of their training, you know what I mean? You can see like there's nowhere near enough upper back shit in here.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so if you have something that's like a holistic picture that's addressing all the issues that powerlifters run into, which is that was my idea. That was the thinking. Like what do we need? If I put together these templates you can replace this with something similar that does essentially the same thing, but you can't put something unrelated in that spot, right? That's the rule. That covers everything that you need. You'll never have weak points. Somebody can just focus on technique because everything's getting developed. Everything's being addressed the way it needs to. And of course, there's like little things where you might need to adjust something up where this needs to be a priority for a little bit, put more emphasis on hip strength, whatever. You know what I mean? But for the most part, like you said, it's technique.
Yeah,
and that's
for
the
the
thing.
most part.
No one wants to look at that. They want to know what
They
different
want-
program. I need a different bench program. I need a different deadlift. I need to do small off for my squat. You know what I mean?
No, they need to pick a program, stay with it, learn it, master it, and then fine tune the technique. Now, if you're a high intermediate advanced, there's going to be, physical weaknesses that pop up. Usually because of technique. Because how do you spot the weak point? The technique breaks.
Because their training is ignoring the area that's weak because they're always failing there. Or they're always.
But it's diagnosed by broken technique. And it takes a skilled eye to know, is this because of the technique or is this because the muscle's not strong enough to keep the technique? And usually 80% of the time it's the technique.
It's almost, exactly.
Now, the worst sticking point is the one that just the lift comes up perfectly and stalls.
Yeah. And how often do you see that though? That's
almost
like,
never.
That's like 1 in 10 million.
Yes.
That's something I talk about all the time in seminars. Like, anybody ever see someone fail on squat in a meet? And then I'm like, how many people have ever seen someone fail on squat in a meet that was in the perfect position and their legs just failed?
It happened to me once.
I've seen it once, maybe twice ever.
One time. It was 275s, 870 squat. I remember what it was because I was depressed for a month. Because usually you'll miss something, you know why, and you know how to fix it.
This wasn't there.
I wasn't fucking strong enough. And then you're like, oh, fuck. Getting stronger when you're at that point, getting stronger is the hardest thing to do.
So that what you're talking about, like where it just wasn't there?
Yeah.
I love hearing that at meets because that's all you hear from like everybody, from like every coach. When the person comes up, they're like, "Oh, it just wasn't there," and I'm like,
Yeah, because your technique.
I'm like, it's because your technique. That was fucking horrible. Like it came out of bar path, like 6 inches. No one on earth could correct that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it wasn't there, but why wasn't it there?
Yeah.
It wasn't because you didn't have the strength.
It's rare, like you said. It's very rare to see somebody go full throttle on a lift, keep pushing, and fucking stall.
Right.
And they're still pushing, and they're not going this way. They're not going this way. It's still, and it just they run out of gas, and it's like, fuck. Well, shit. You need to go up a weight class.
That's when you yell, "Be stronger."
Yes, it's time to get more developed. At that point, that's when you need more muscles now.
Yep, you gotta go up a weight class.
Yeah, you gotta work for a little bit. That's all. Yeah.
What we got next?
Well, speaking of technique, this guy said, "Can you fix a lot of technique issues by just getting stronger?"
Yes and no, but I'll let you take that.
Okay, so I'll put it like this: if you fix technique, you can definitely get stronger. I mean, like it's from just getting stronger. Can you fix a lot of technique? I mean, that's a very complicated proposition.
Well,
it seems simple, but like really, if the answer is no, if it's just getting stronger, because I mean, specifically, you could get strong as shit, using. It depends. It's a depend situation there.
Well, here's my question back to that. What's the alternative?
Right.
To not work technique?
Right. Well, there is a lot of that. There's a quotient now that's like, just train as heavy as you can and then your technique will improve. Which I will say that in 20-something years of doing this, I've never seen fucking happen ever.
But you're still doing the set.
Right.
So how much more effort does it take to actually focus on doing it right?
Well, it'll change your numbers. That's the thing.
Oh, I get what you're saying. The ego.
The training numbers.
They're going to get weaker before they get stronger.
I agree that you can absolutely train technique and strength at the same time, and that's what we do. That's the goal.
Yeah.
You should train technique and strength at the same time. The goal should be to get stronger for sure, but how are you going to get stronger in a way that's sustainable and that's going to carry over the platform? And the answer to that question, in my opinion, is technique, by drilling technique.
I mean, what sport requires no technical development?
None that I'm aware of.
There's none.
There's really only one that I know of that you actually are going to train, and the training is the actual sport, which is running.
I mean, even sex people look at the Kama Sutra.
Right, you're right. Technique. Right. I mean, it is what it is. No. I mean, I don't know. I feel like that was I don't know if that's like it's supposed to be like a trick question or
No,
something.
I kind of know where it's coming from, because it's like, fuck the technique, just get stronger and your technique will get better.
People
and if
say
you're
that.
a beginner, I get that, but you're still doing the set, and I don't get that.
Yeah, see, my point is, like, if you're a beginner, like, now is the fucking time to not establish
Exactly.
bad patterns of movement.
Exactly. That's where I'm saying you're still doing the set.
Yeah.
So it requires very little more effort to be able to do it right. You know, so what? You got to lower your fucking weight. You
Ego.
suck anyhow.
Ego. Yeah, exactly.
If you're doing sets with 225, who the fuck cares? It sucks if you go to 185. Is that much different than 2 1/4?
You know who cares? Somebody that's cutting to 198, you know what I mean? So that they can total 1,100 pounds.
Oh,
Like,
well,
you know what I
that's a
mean?
whole nother fucking-
That's what I mean. Like, there's a lot of that.
That's
I mean? It's
going
like-
back to what we talked about earlier. They need a long-term plan.
Right, I agree. Yeah, I agree. Like, yeah, that people are worried about. You're focused on the wrong things.
Yeah.
It's not that the things that are going to help you are too hard to do. It's that you're spending all of your energy focused on things that are doing nothing.
Don't worry about the 300-pound bench. Think about the 400-pound bench you'll be able to do in 8 years.
And don't worry about your weight class. Don't worry about things like that yet. And not to say that at some point that's not a
It's
factor. It
a
is.
long
But
time
like
out.
when you're a beginner, that's the last thing you need to worry about is dealing with water cuts and how that's going to affect. How about learning how to deal with, like,
A meet.
yeah, managing fatigue going into a meet and being able to show up and perform, right? Instead of like throwing this X factor into the mix. That's what a lot of people do too.
Blow their whole training, because now you don't know.
No, I mean, I don't think anybody is trying to just do technique and not get strong. Which there's someone that's like talking. There's like a lot of I'm hearing like this like echo chamber on the internet of people that are like mad at technique. Like, oh, you care about his technique, then you're never going to be strong. And it's like, okay, well, why are people working on technique? Because they want to be strong. Like, the point is,
Yeah.
like, strength is the goal. Like,
I mean,
that's-
so that confuses me so much, because I still fall back on that. You're still doing the set anyhow.
yeah, why? Yeah, if you do the work, man, might as well do it right.
Yeah,
It's like,
I don't fucking get it.
nah. I really do think it's ego. I have no other explanation for that other than they don't want to reduce the weight on the bar, especially when things are so convoluted. Like, look at like for example, if it's a situation where you're doing conjugate or something, who cares what the weight on the bar is?
Nobody gives a fuck.
Yeah, like you're doing bands, doing different things. Like, no one gives a fuck what that adds up to.
No, I mean,
Do what you
nobody
can do
even
correctly,
cares if you break a fucking all-time world record.
I know you won't even
Half
hear-
the comments
half
are going to be
time-
bashing the lift anyhow.
Half the time you don't even hear about it. There's another one that breaks it. You know,
Yeah,
it's like
nobody gives
every
a
couple
fuck.
weeks now. Yeah, it's not even. I agree.
All right. When trying to lower the bar on a back squat, it's hard to adjust my left arm because it's stiff. I end up doing high bar. Recommendations or corrective exercises for my arm so I can lower the bar. Either one of you guys. You can pass too. I mean.
So
Yeah.
I'll take this. So I want to make sure that I understand the question correctly. Okay, so you just tell me if I'm wrong as I start to repeat this. We got somebody who is squatting high bar, essentially because he doesn't have the shoulder mobility to get the bar lower.
That's what it sounds like, yes.
Okay.
Specifically because of his left arm.
Right, because something's going. It's always one shoulder or the other, and that's why it ends up looking helicoptered. You know, when you have somebody that's dealing with that sort of thing where they're trying to progressively get the bar in a better position, but
Compensating.
yeah, so the one side has great mobility and one side's injured and doesn't, and it ends up looking like the whole time. So my advice would be to do the mobility work that you need to get that bar where you need it, but where you need it is really the question, because I think I see most people putting the bar lower than is benefiting them too, and that's causing a lot of issues. There's obviously a lot of factors in terms of limb length and individual differences and so forth.
Muscle mass.
Yeah, anatomical variance. Like, one person's not the same as the other, but most people, and when I say most, I'm looking at like 90% range, are somewhere in the mid bar range, like in mid, between high and low, in terms of what'll be beneficial. And I see a lot of people putting the bar lower than they need to, and that's one of the corrections I'm making that's very common, is bringing the bar up a couple inches. And a matter of an inch in terms of your shoulders and elbows and the amount of the ramifications that are going to affect the rest of your training to get the bar an inch lower, it's actually gotten to the point where I have to ask myself, is it worth having this person fight to get the bar that much lower considering how much of an impact is it going to have on their squat. And then I figure how much of an impact is going to have on their bench having that bar lower, because it always does cost. To have the bar a little bit lower ends up affecting the bench in a negative way.
Training.
And it ends up affecting the pull. Yeah, so you have to ask yourself, like, what's the best answer for the total? However, when you have a situation like what he's talking about, where one shoulder, doesn't have a range of motion that's necessary to get the bar where you want it, and have it stable and have it be where it's not twisting on the squat, that needs to be addressed. So I would have them either talk to a PT or do whatever needs to be done in terms of mobility stuff, assuming there's no like structural impingement there.
Yeah.
To get that shoulder in the position they need to. And then with the way that we train, we're easily able to hammer this stuff out, because you have the bar on your back every week. You're always doing that same kind of bar. We're always squatting with a squat bar. So we're really drilling that. We're really able to get into a position that's effective and learn to cue the upper back effectively. Excuse me. Drank too much soda. Learn to cue the upper back effectively so that you can keep the bar where you need it without having it like super high, super low, and stabilizing that bar is a big thing too. A cue I see that seems to be pretty popular is wrecking people left and right. The idea of pulling the bar down. And the idea of pulling the bar down onto your back while you're squatting can be devastating, depending on the position. So if you're already in a position where you've maxed out your shoulder mobility, your elbow mobility, in terms of how much flexion you have at the elbow, and you're actively pulling down on that bar on the descent, on the squat, during the reversal, there's always some flex, even in a squat bar. But God forbid you're using a gym bar. So think about that flex, and you're pulling down and helping with that flex. Well, that flex is going to return on the reversal, and you're essentially doing a max effort 1 inch negative on your elbows and shoulders every rep, every time you take a heavy squat. And for raw lifters that tend to move a lot faster, that's even more of a consideration. So another big thing there is to make sure that people are wearing wrist wraps when they squat, because that can help a lot with the elbows, believe it or not, the elbows and the shoulders, because the weakest link in the chain to hold that bar on your back is your wrists. And the elbows and shoulders tend to try to accommodate, try to protect the wrist, and it causes more issues with elbow tendonitis and stuff like that, which affects the bench press as well. And then the shoulder stress and all the other stuff affects the bench press. So I try and try to keep a holistic view of like all three lifts, like look at the total. Like I don't just ask myself, what is this change gonna affect on this lift? I ask myself, what is this change going to affect on this lifter's total? Yeah. Because sometimes one thing will be positive in one lift, but when I look at the big picture, it's actually a bad move. So something to think about there, just a little additional stuff on top of the bar placement, but definitely address the shoulder mobility any way you're able. And you don't want that bar twisting.
So. Yeah, I agree 100%. Some people will try to force an extra 10 pounds on the squat. Meanwhile, sacrifice 40 pounds off their bench.
In the meet, too. Come on, man.
Yeah, exactly. And the meet's critical. You got to be in really good fucking shape to take a fourth attempt, all-time world record on a squat. Or it better be an all-time world record that you're
even
cool.
Even if it's your third attempt, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like, like we said, we got that 104, and that 104% is designed so you can finish the meet. Right? So that doesn't mean you probably couldn't get 105, 105.5, 106%. Maybe you could, but that's going to trash your bench formula is not going to work. Yeah. And if you're not using the formula, God forbid, now you're just kind of guessing. Yeah. And it's definitely going to have, like you said, a deleterious effect. It's going to have.
I've always felt that
impact.
Even with my own competitive career, if I knew I was going to try to shoot for the moon on my squat, then I better be conditioned enough to be able to bench with my feet out in front or tucked.
Right, that's true.
I have to be ready for both, because if I'm in the warm-up room, my back starts cramping and hamstrings start cramping, and that's all I know is benching with an arch, tucked.
And how much more in gear?
Well,
that's a whole other factor. People don't get that.
Yeah.
How much more complicated everything is in terms of considering the implications of what you're doing now, and how's that going to affect?
Yeah, this is definitely more a factor with gear, because it's going to cramp shit up way more, and you're lifting a heavier load.
Right.
Which is
The systemic
Yeah.
stress is significant. Yeah.
yeah.
'cause
So
it's
I always had to make sure I could bench feet out and tucked, that I could pull sumo and conventional, because I didn't know what the squat was going to do, and the squat was my best lift. So I knew that was it was always going to be detrimental to one of the two.
Right.
So I needed a backup plan. And the backup plan was still always going to be maybe 20, 30 pounds less, but it's better than the alternative
still a
of not
total.
even getting my opener.
Right. It's still a total.
It's still a total. So the total is what matters, which is what you said, is your focus has to be on that total. Like, are you ready to be able to get a 5-pound PR total?
And honestly, that's all that matters
Yes.
to me. I would rather you get a 5-pound total PR than a 10-pound single lift PR every
any
single
day.
day of the week, man, because they don't, that's what wins the meet.
Yeah.
That's what's going to have you be, and there's a difference if you're a single lift lifter too.
Well, the total requires skill.
Right. The
More
total's-
so. More so.
Yeah. This is something, who was it that said that? I think it was Dan Green said it to me. He said, it's one thing to be like a bench specialist. It's a whole nother thing to be a total specialist.
Actually, it's two different skill sets. I
That's
think.
true. It's
It
totally
really is.
different. And like the variance, when I think about gear, like how much variance you guys had to deal with for people that were at the top level. Like, and for example, even like Vinny was telling me about when he got the all-time bench. He had no idea he was going to get that.
Nope.
He wasn't even in the neighborhood of that.
Everything fell right.
And that day, and he was like, fuck it, I'm going to go for the all-time. And he went for it and got it.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of variance you got
to seize the day
there, yeah.
where Raw is not like that.
No, and Raw,
You
you
know,
have to be responsible.
Yeah,
Like, it's not like
way more.
Yeah, because there's really no chance of that happening.
Yeah.
Nobody gets 60 pounds more than they thought on a lift.
No.
You know what I mean? Because it's not about there's so many factors with the gear fitting right, with you being able, getting it set exactly where you need it. You're like, all right, I'm ready. Like I can do
Yeah,
more.
roll. Yeah, I mean, it's a different mindset too. One's a little bit more aggressive, one's more reserved, but they're still not one's better than the other, because it's
different.
very hard, to go from one to the other, and very few people have gone from, multiply to top raw to top raw to top mountain. There's people that have done it,
Sure.
but they'll tell you it's a completely different game.
Even single. I mean,
Yeah.
I have all the respect in the world for Ellen and that, where she's like winning. She won the Olympia back-to-back single ply, won the Arnold, right? And like she's winning these meets against girls that are like 25 and molten and tearing through every division, like doing raw, wrapped, single ply, and every year PRing and like winning all these meets. Yeah, and that's like, because when you consider, those are very different.
Well, big time.
Raw to wrapped is very different, and then wrapped to single ply is very different. And
They're
to be
all-
able to excel in all those is so impressive to me.
Yeah.
Some people have so much talent.
Yeah, in a way, they're all different sports.
They are. They're different. It's like people that like the races. You like the funny cars, but you also like the normal quarter mile stuff too. You know what I mean? Like it's just different. You know what I mean? It's like funny cars are cool because, well, when they do make it down the track, it's amazing, and when they don't, it's still amazing because they fucking explode. You know what I mean? So it's still, you know what I mean?
It's still something to watch.
It's still entertaining.
Yeah.
It's entertaining as hell. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Generally speaking, at what point should a person start using a belt, wraps, sleeves, etc.? This guy's current lifts are 530 squat, 370 bench, 565 deadlift, and he has yet to use any of them. And
What was the squat again?
squat was 530. 370 bench, 565 deadlift. Kilos, I imagine. No, I'm kidding.
All right, so I mean, I'm happy to give my input on this. I never wore a belt for a long time, and I wish I did sooner. I probably, I lifted for 20 years without a belt, or 18 years without a belt, and I really didn't use much in terms of supportive gear. But in coaching, for as long as I've been coaching with all these different people and moving through different divisions of coaching and working with wrapped and raw, I can see how the stimulus variable of using wraps is beneficial to raw lifters. And I can see how wearing a belt can be beneficial even to your beltless lifts. So, in other words, I think there's this misunderstanding that if you wear a belt, it's going to make you weaker somehow. And it really won't. So what'll happen is it'll change the way you perform the movement in a similar way to wearing wraps will change the way you perform a movement. right? So it's sort of a skill you have to learn, but it's not going to make you weaker, right? Because if you take a mesocycle out of the belt, it'll come right back. It'll catch right up as long as you don't go 10 years without it. You know?
Yeah.
But the point is, like, it's not a detriment. It may actually be a way that you can leapfrog and continue to make progress. So it's another variable you have to play with without changing the movement. And for me, like, that's what I want.
Yeah.
I want to be able to not change the lift, but change the way it's being executed somehow. So that's something you could do a mesocycle of every macrocycle without a belt. And, you know, maybe you do one without a belt. Maybe you do one in sleeves after that. And maybe you do one wrapped after that and then do the meat wrapped. And it was like you were talking about, that's a reasonable way to progress. And you could still do it that way. You don't have to. But I think that leaving the belt out of the mix or leaving the wraps out of the mix, even for a person that's not going to compete in a belt of reps, is probably not the best move. Plus, there's a safety aspect of it.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in training and you're wearing a belt, you're safer. You can generate intra-abdominal pressure a little bit more easily. It's protective. So that's my opinion on it.
Yeah.
Okay. How would you manage programming more deadlifts into conjugate along with trying to keep squats up? Notice deads have dropped a little and want to bring them back up.
I'll answer it really quick, then we'll get back to questions that Swede is more proficient at answering. I would throw it as a secondary supplemental movement on either of these, the max effort or the dynamic, doesn't matter. You could put it in as submaximal and, you know, progress up just using triples or whatever it is. So don't make it too complicated. You don't want to do max effort work twice a week on the pulls, you know, so it can be tossed in either for speed work on the speed day. Hell, it can be speed work on the other day. Just people are afraid to throw it in. You don't need to be afraid to throw it in. Okay. That's that.
This guy said, is it bad to arch the lower back when squatting?
You got to define that.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about going into lumbar extension intentionally before you squat, no, probably not a good deal.
No,
so yeah,
not good.
That's bad. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding on the internet from people watching videos and hearing the arch cue, and they don't understand what's being cued is not. They're not telling them to go into lumbar extension. Like, you know, obviously, that should be obvious. A lot of times when that cue's being used, like we were saying before, it's a matter of someone's fighting against canvas in gear, and that's a great cue to keep you from going into flexion, which will allow one of those discs to fire out of your back across the room, and it hurts. It's no fun, trust me. So it can be a useful cue, but I don't think you're ever going to want to intentionally actually arch. And I've seen people arch before they get under the bar, which is insanity. But whatever.
Okay.
You want your back tight, you know, from top to bottom.
Bracing.
Yeah.
Bracing. A good cue for that, I think, is to think about pulling the ribs down from the side closer to the pelvis. If you can keep the pelvis neutral and the rib cage neutral, and yank those ribs down, that's going to compress the discs with a somewhat neutral spine, which, like, neutral's a range, you know? But you can stay neutral and be completely braced, have enough intra-abdominal, intrathoracic pressure to stabilize all that. That's your best bet. Not arching intentionally, I don't think.
From a coaching perspective, the easiest thing to do is to watch the bar path on the concentric. It should be in a straight line, you know? So usually any deviation from that, whatever you do to correct it to become that straight line, is going to be the right answer. It's almost impossible to squat in a straight line if you're in an anterior pelvic tilt or an extreme posterior pelvic tilt. There's going to be deviations from that.
Yeah, no doubt. Bar path is like really what I look at when I'm doing video review. Everything is usually from the side unless I ask for different angles of video if I'm concerned about shifting or something like that. And then I can see from the side view, okay, bar path's messed up. Why is it messed up? And what cue will fix it? And then do it like that. But no, I don't ever use the cue to arch. So, for me, anyway.
I'm assuming this is a joke here, but the guy said, talk about when you were a 380-plus pound bodybuilder and what you were doing to get jacked.
I was never 380.
I
Were
was
you
never
380?
No, I was about 330 at one point.
No kidding.
Yeah, okay, so I'll tell you some crazy things I did in terms of food intake. At one point, I was eating over 9,000 calories a day.
Oh, fuck. And that was mostly clean, too.
Yeah.
So that's a fuck ton of food.
So it was like 4 shakes. Those shakes were 150 grams of carbs, 75 grams of protein. and I remember exactly what it was that I used too. It was like this. It was like apple flavored protein. It was from I'm trying to remember. It was Nectar was the name of it.
I remember that
Remember
shit.
Nectar? Yeah. So 3 scoops of that was 75 grams. I would do that, and 6 scoops of Ultra Fuel, which was like powder carbs. They don't make it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have to use a different company now. But yeah, I used to do that 4 times a day.
I used to pound the Ultra Fuel too.
Yeah, Ultra Fuel is the best, man. It's so easy to digest. It's so much carbs, and it's like, and you can get 150 carbs in like 12 ounces if you blend it up real.
I would take the container, dump half the powder into a lemonade container, and then put water in the actual container.
Oh, that's great.
Water in the lemonade, shake it up. Then I would drink 1 container every day. So I was going through 1 bottle, 1 jug.
Yeah.
Every other day.
They're cheap. It was like $11.
Yeah, and I was getting them wholesale.
Yeah.
Louis had some deals set up. So, oh man, that shit.
Back in the day before that, actually, when I was doing this, now that I'm thinking of it, they were the glass containers.
Yep.
And I would get cases of the glass containers in my fridge, and I would do 1.5 containers was 150. So I would do that, and then 3 scoops of the other, and you didn't even need a blender. That stuff mixed real easy, but it was expensive.
Yeah, when I couldn't afford the Ultra Fuel, I buy maltodextrin from the horse supply shop.
Maltodextrin, yeah, that's what I use now. Maltodextrin.
Yeah, it was
works.
cheap
It's
too,
the same
man. It
thing.
was super cheap.
I know. I get like 50 pounds of it or something or actually, I think it's 20 pounds, but it's some ridiculous price, like whatever.
So you had the 4 shakes then.
Those, and then my other meals were typically like I would have all you could eat sushi every day. There's a place near me, so I'll probably eat, anywhere like 20 to 30 pieces of tuna sushi would be one of my meals. So that was a lower fat meal. So I would make sure to never eat the fried stuff because it slows gastric emptying. So it would keep me from being able to eat again soon. And yeah, the meals were insane. I still do some aspects of it. Like if you look at my diet now, it's like specters of back then, but it was like all of it at once, consistently every day. Like I would do 2 cups dry of oatmeal every day in the morning. I still do that now in a shake. I just put it in and blend it with like protein. But that was another thing I did with like 4 or 5 tablespoons of peanut butter and 2 cups of dry oatmeal, which is like, I don't know, it's like 27 cups of oatmeal when you're done with it. It's like a bucket. But I would just drink it like that to get it all down. Do that. I was doing chicken shakes. I still do the chicken shakes, but basically, yeah, I would do probably 2 pounds of chicken in the form of those shakes. Then I would do those other shakes. I would eat at least 1 red meat meal a day. I'll have sushi every day. I would eat ice cream pretty much like every night. That was like my treat for getting all the other stuff down. Eggs. Every morning breakfast was an insane amount of eggs.
So pretty much just eating at all times.
It was misery. Honestly, it got to the point where I was just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem people make that are trying to gain weight is they'll push it for Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And then the weekend comes and they back it down. Instead of having, 5 huge meals or whatever it is, they have 3.
I was young. I was a machine, dude.
You got to do it every day.
I've always documented everything. Like I even have like food journals from when I was like 18.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. When you were gaining weight, did you always weigh yourself at night on the scale?
Because you're heavier at
then
night.
When you lose weight, you weigh yourself in the morning after a shower and shit.
So I would get upset so I wouldn't weigh myself. I would only weigh myself like every 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I would weigh myself and be a couple pounds light, and I'm already so full of food, I feel like I'm going to throw up and shit at the same time. And I'm like, I'd be so upset, So then like doing it that way, it gives enough time for me to put on weight, And honestly, at that size, I was so miserable.
It's hard.
I was just so tired all the time. I would fantasize about going to sleep. Like I remember I would be in my car sometimes, and I would stop and park somewhere and fall asleep before I would get out of the car.
You're drinking 10 cups of coffee a day and you have fucking narcolepsy.
Everything hurts. It's just so much. It was just so much. And I feel like I'm a little lighter now. I'm in the 260s now, and I feel so much better. God. And even when I was 290, a few years ago, it's just such a difference from that to this, even to be leaner and be back in good shape again. It feels so much better. But the sleep's better too. I still do the CPAP thing, but yeah, being that big is people don't understand. It's cool because you're strong as a fucking gorilla. And it's fun when you train, but the rest of your life sucks.
Oh yeah, it's you get used to it.
2 hours,
You do get used to it, but man, it's not what people think.
You don't realize, that's it. Like you said, you're used to it. You get put to sleep to the fact that it doesn't suck as much for other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, everything doesn't hurt this bad for other people.
Yep.
I feel like, and then when I was done with that, I was old enough and had been doing this long enough that everything hurts anyway.
Yep.
So now I can't even imagine being in that position with as wrecked as the body gets. You know,
You can die.
yeah, exactly. I'm trying to stay alive.
All right, here's a programming question. This guy's trying to understand the difference between fifth set and conjugate. So he said, so fifth set is very specific in regards to the movements, tech needs, hypertrophy needs, etc. And conjugate seems to be specific in regards to mental preparation of taking max lifts and making that a norm.
That's an accurate assessment, I think, on my end of things. And
Yeah,
I
mean,
agree. I agree
they're-
with the other two. There's probably more to it than that. But
Yeah. I mean, it's one's kind of more of a block orientation type of programming, and the other one is conjugate. So you're dealing with two entirely different spheres of programming, where, you know, the third sphere would just be straight up 100% basic linear periodization, and then another would be bodybuilding training. I mean, there's different, you know, methodologies of training, and where I think people make the mistake is they'll try to combine two. You know, and that's not how it works.
these are both good. Imagine both together.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. It's a nightmare.
it's shit.
That's why there's only 3 fucking different bases.
I love chocolate and steak. Maybe I
Yeah.
should put chocolate all over my fucking steak.
Yeah, if you look at any program that's solid and that works, you're going to see that it stems from one of those 3 bases.
Yeah.
And there's very few, and if it doesn't, then it's not going to be an effective program. That's what I've learned from 40 years of doing this shit.
Probably nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah, and now if it's bodybuilding and it is that 4th variable, you know, which is just, you know, destroy the muscle, let the muscle heal, recover, go again. You know, there's a lot more variability with bodybuilding training, but not with the diet.
Because, and I think part of that is because you can repotentiate for hypertrophy just by changing the type of hypertrophy that you're doing.
Yeah,
So you don't really need any type of periodized approach to that. I mean, I guess you could.
You
But
could.
realistically, you're just changing the stimulus. There's no need for blocks of that.
no, but the nutrition is way more.
Right. Well, that's
Critical
Yeah. Well,
there.
I mean, imagine if we took nutrition that seriously with powerlifting.
Yeah.
I think people should. I think people take it like, oh, well, I'm competing in powerlifting, and it's like an out that they don't need to be in shape. And like, dude, look at the best powerlifters in the world right now.
Yeah,
They look like fucking bodybuilders. It's not a coincidence.
yeah. Well, they're not. You know, I've always said if you're in a calorie surplus, it really doesn't fucking matter. You're going to recover. You're pretty much covering all your bases, with the exception of maybe vitamin D and some other shit that people are
Right.
typically low in. But as soon as you start getting to a deficit, calorie deficit, or even maintenance, where I think a lot of the people competing today are just a little over maintenance.
Right.
That's how they're getting lean.
Right.
You know, is
Back
they're
and
not
forth,
really
back and
going.
forth.
You know, they're not really losing weight. They're not really gaining. They're just by trying to stay in a weight class.
Yeah.
For intermediate to advanced, when you fight a weight class, you get leaner every time you compete.
No doubt.
Then it will get to a point in a few years where you can't make weight anymore.
Yeah, where you're like, maybe it's time for another weight class.
You know, then you got to go up because you can't put any more lean muscle on.
Right.
So I agree.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But is when those calories come down more to the maintenance and to the deficit, nutrition becomes more important,
So I've had.
or the micronutrients become more important.
No, I agree. Yeah, that's where you run into deficits
Mm-hmm.
other than like calorie deficit. But I've found people do pretty well with going back and forth as long as that's where it becomes more crucial that there's a self-regulating component to the type of system you're using, to the type of training you're doing, because fatigue accumulates at a much higher rate when you're in calorie deficit. Central fatigue does.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, you're right, there's recovery components that are affected by that as well. So it's one of the things that I consider a risk factor for injury, is being in a calorie deficit.
Mm-hmm.
So doing that and that's not to say you can't ever be in a calorie deficit or you're end up fat as shit.
You
It
need to be very cognizant of what you're putting in your system.
We
Then.
need to be aware that like you're dealing with now an enhanced risk for injury. You're not going to get as much of an adaptation. So during this period, the goal is shifting more to maintenance.
Well, empty calories are
That too,
Terrible.
what calories you're eating become more crucial. But when you're in deficit, I mean, like, so if people say they're cutting, I don't want to make it sound like you can't cut. You can cut. You just have to adjust the programming to suit that, and you have to understand that like cutting before meet is probably not the best move. You know, if you want to get to where you're trying to get leaner, and then you can train a little above a little above your maintenance calories, you're actually going to be recovering well that way. Whereas if you're trying to make weight going into a meet and part of that is going into calorie deficit right before you peak, like you might as well just like smash yourself in the nuts with a hammer. Like that's the worst plan I've ever heard.
You know what I've always said about that is if you want to cut before meet, I mean, really cut before meet, like people are doing that, breaking world records.
Yeah.
You'll never have to ask anybody how to do it. Because when that time comes, you'll be working with people who know what to do. So when it's time to do it, you'll not have any questions on how to do it.
No
So
question.
if you have questions on how to do it, it's not time to do it.
Right. Right. If you don't have someone there that's helping you. Yeah.
Well,
like
and that comes with the territory, though. When that time comes that you need to be able to do that, those people will be there.
Right.
You know, if they're not there, well, then you're not good enough to do it yet.
Right. And exactly. Because people are going to step up and help you. Like I've helped a million people. Like people do 30-pound cuts for all-time world records.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
So there's a big clue if you're asking around and people are like, nah, man, you shouldn't do that yet.
That's a good sign. That means the consensus is you ain't ready yet.
Yep.
You probably don't need to cut yet.
Yep. If you have to seek the answer, you're not ready for if you have to seek the question, you're not ready for the answer.
Another cool trick you can do to figure that out is ask yourself, how far is this number that I'm potentially going to squat or total from the record? Because if it's like 200 pounds from the world record, like you don't need to practice yet with the cuts.
No, they'll hear stories about these people that cut 30 pounds and went and broke records, and they're not those people.
Yeah, you ain't. That's the thing is like that was his 4th all-time squat record.
Yeah, in 13th year competing.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Exactly. Or exactly. Or examples like people like Amit, where he was like a pro bodybuilder who was competing in the Olympia.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
A lot of experience with this sort of stuff. You know what I mean? Like these are people that are not like, you know what I mean? It's not like
the other thing they don't hear is how many people did the same thing but couldn't hit their second attempt.
that's the reason the records are where they are.
Yeah.
If everybody could cut 30 pounds, I mean, the records would be significantly different. That in and of itself is a special skill that you develop, you know, when the time comes.
And they didn't just start with the 30 pounds.
No, exactly. And they have the point is they have people with a ton of experience helping them and advising them and keeping them from fucking dying, which is another part of this. People don't take this stuff seriously. I know of people who have come to me and they're like, oh, last time I did a cut, I was hospitalized. And I'm like, oh, I hear about the stuff.
I know many.
Yeah. And I'm like, it's really not that hard to avoid that.
No.
You know, but
I mean, they get carried
it's
on the scale.
incentivized. It's like a heroic thing to do a cut. Like I did this cut. Okay.
Yep.
But how much did you lift?
It's a whole,
That's all.
challenge most people don't even need.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it adds a layer of
And it is
complexity to a
way-
situation that's already convoluted as fuck. Why do you want more complexity there? You know what I mean? I don't know.
All right. Would it ever make sense to potentially take the 6th week deload as an opportunity to take 1 or 2 heavy singles instead of, say, 5x3 or 3x5 at 50% to help that lifter who's had less practice on the platform, as this should be less total volume?
I think he's talking about fist set.
Yeah, somebody knows your program.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay. So does it ever make sense to not deload on the deload week? No. That's what it sounded like to me. As a
Yeah,
clip.
that's what I got.
Yeah, no, you still got to deload, even if you're a beginner, even if you want more practice. That's the other thing. Like, I love people that are like, oh, this isn't enough work for me. It's like, how do you know? You know what I mean?
I don't know why that fucking hit me this funny.
Like, how do you fucking know it's not enough work for you? You know what I mean? Did you do this for 6 months and not make progress? No, that's the thing is like, and it's always people that like bench 270 pounds that want to have that argument with you. I never understood that. It seems like the people that are like, you know, 600-pound benchers and they're just like, okay, like, yeah, all right, good. Yeah, we'll do this. The thing is like, keep doing it. It's enough. I promise it's enough. You know what I mean? Like maybe you need more than the guy that benches 600 and squats 1,000. Probably not.
You know something?
Probably you're not that special.
Yeah, a variable that people can look at that ask those questions is how much rest are you taking between sets? Really?
Right.
Really? Not
That
what's
too.
programmed, but what are you really doing?
No, that too. Because
You know?
you're right. Like I that'll beat the shit out of me if I fly through my 5 sets. For the rest of the session, I'm ready to die.
Well, accessories, all the stuff that comes after that.
Honestly, squats, I do that. I make myself do that because otherwise it gets, you know, you just drag it out. Like I need another minute.
Yeah, well, it's fatigue management. take 15 minutes between sets. It's a lot different than taking 3-4.
Right. And I think there's something to that in terms of like the conditioning for training. Not taking those huge breaks, you can train harder.
Yep.
You can, and it actually you'll get an adaptation that allows you to continue to train harder more quickly, because it comes down to at the end of the day, like, all right, I got 2 hours to train. I got 3 hours worth of work with the rate that I'm training. It's like, do I come back the next day and add a day to my training? I give people the option to do that, and that's why they have a day off in between. Because if you really can't get through it, I'd rather you do good.
Yeah.
You know, I'd rather you not half-ass it and try and fly through shit at the end. Come back the next day and finish the assistance if you have to. But, like, yeah, if you can develop that, develop it. I got plenty of people that do, where they develop that and they get the same adaptation. Just being lazy. You know?
All right. What should I do if I bench, or let me reread this, sorry. What should I do if bench pressing only develops my triceps? What am I doing wrong?
I don't think that's necessarily a sign that you're doing something wrong. If you're seeing more adaptation in your triceps, you might be somebody who mechanically the bench press for you is more dependent on the triceps. It might not necessarily be that you're doing something wrong. You might be someone who's more of a deltoid and tricep presser than pecs. If you notice you're not getting any pec development, that's probably a lack of thoracic extension. So people that bench really flat backed tend to be like, it ends up being more front deltoid in my experience from what I've seen. And people that are able to get into a really good amount of thoracic extension, because that puts more of a stress on the pecs, it makes them more active. And it's a huge muscle that can really help the movement. So if you're not doing that, you should do that. That's one consideration. But I don't think it's necessarily a sign that you're doing something wrong with your bench the way you're developing. A lot of that is genetics in terms of certain muscle groups develop better on certain people. Also, it could be a consideration of limb length, individual leverages, where it's putting more emphasis on the triceps for that person based on their, you know, where their bar path is, the way they're pressing. So it could be a number of things, but.
Okay. What age do you guys recommend a child start working out with weights?
I started at 12. You know?
I'd say when they're ready. You know, I don't see the problem being with the child. I see the problem being with the parent.
Yeah.
You know, so
You're right about that.
The biggest consideration that I would look at is, you know, the parent that's really passionate about training is going to want their kids to train, and they're going to want their kids to train for their entire life. So if you force something on a kid that they don't want to do, they're not going to want to do it for the rest of their life.
No.
So if it takes till they're 16 before they're ready, 17, 18, let them tell you when they want to train. And then you help them, and then it will become something that they'll want to do for the rest of their life. That isn't to say don't introduce them to exercise.
It's a cool opportunity for a parent to be able to like lead from the front and be a role model without imposing your will on the kid. So in other words, saying like, you know, like, I love training. This is something that's really important to me. This is something that, you know, that dad does, looking at it that way instead of looking at it from the perspective of like, you should do this, you need to do this so you're not weak, you know, and that changes things dramatically. I was fortunate in that I didn't really have any pressure in either direction. I just needed to get stronger. I wanted to be bigger, and, you know, I figured out that lifting weights would help me with that, and everything I did for the first probably 3 years was all sets of 10. Because I thought that was what, if you couldn't do 10, I thought it was worthless. Because that was what I think it said on the box. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, that was my initial advice. Yeah, it was like, you know, you got to get at least 10 or it's no good. So I was doing sets of 10 with 100 pounds forever. You know, but I think that you can easily overdo it, and strength should not be the goal, you know, with early teens and preteens.
They gotta have fun. You know, it's a tough spot, because for us that have been doing this, you know, our whole life, you know, we want them to be able to do it, but you got to understand what you're using it for yourself. You're using it, you know, outside of the sport and all the other stuff. You're using it as a way to cope. You're using it for your exercise. You're using it for your health. You're using it for all these other things. And all those other things may be the only things that your kids are going to want to use it for.
Right.
You know, so if you destroy it by imposing your will on them, and they're doing meets when they're fucking 8 or 9, I can pretty much guarantee nobody that's doing a meet when they're 9 is doing a meet when they're 23.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that, because it sours it for them.
Yeah.
It's like wrestling and stuff in high school. Like,
and exercise is too important in today's world to make it something that a kid hates.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, the kids need to learn that they need to exercise, they need to walk, they need to make, you know, good food choices and stuff like that. And as a parent, that's what you want to teach them first, not so much a bench, squat, and deadlift.
Right.
You know, now if they bring it to you, by all means.
Sure.
You know,
I mean, the
help
thing
them.
is, like, man, if you're, like I said, if you're leading from the front, they're going to be hungry for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then it can be a thing that, you know, that you guys can have together or that you can teach them about. And that's, I mean, that's what life's about.
Mm-hmm.
Passing on.
Well, I mean, the thing is that, you know, for a lot of us, training is our passion. You know, so what if a different passion was imposed on us instead of training? Say, my dad loved fucking football. So he
Right.
wanted me to play football. And I played football, but I hated football.
Right.
So I hated him for making me have to play football.
And as a result, too, look, like, you don't give a fuck about football, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. It has
Yeah.
the,
So
it
be
has the
careful what you wish
opposite-
for.
Has the opposite effect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one thing on that I want to kind of expound on a little bit. God, I can't imagine the trajectory that my life would have gone, you know, or what the change in trajectory would have been, rather, if I hadn't ever had a bar in my hand. You know, because I'm pretty sure I would have still ended up in the bad places that I did and the bad positions I was in, because that stuff was there. But, like, what if the bar wasn't there? You know?
That's why I was taken to a gym.
Yeah. I mean, it's a life-saving thing, man. You know as well as
Yeah.
we've talked about this when you were young, too, right?
Yeah.
Like you
My
went
dad
to the police gym, right?
Took me to a fucking police gym.
Right.
And you know, it kind of contradicts what I just said, but you got to understand, when I went there, I loved it.
Yeah.
You know,
No, well, you
so
wanted
it was the right call.
That's the thing. You wanted it.
It was the right call, and it kept me from a lot of worse shit.
I would be really hesitant to make it something that, like, where it's like, okay, you got to do this. You know, like when you force it, because anything like that, when coming from a parent, like, the kids always want to do the opposite. And who
Especially
knows?
when they're kids.
And who knows? Maybe this is the thing that, like, for me, man, that saved my life. Like, literally saved my life. Like, literally turned the direction of my life around 180 degrees. And if I didn't have that, like, it's not like it was an immediate effect either.
You don't know what's happening.
Like, I had that over a course of, like, God, I was in my 20s when I went into prison. And it was already part of my life. But if I didn't have that foundation, everything that came after would have been impossible, you know? So, like, who knows? I can't imagine the difference in my life that I would have had without that. So that's the reason that, like, when younger people ask me for help, even if it's annoying, even if they're the 100th person that's asked me for help, like, in terms of what I can actually do, answer a question, something like that, I do it because...
So, it's a big reason why you are the coach that you are.
You're right.
Is because of that. Without that, you wouldn't be the same coach as you are.
I wouldn't be able to empathize with people in the way that I am.
Mm-hmm.
That's the truth. Yeah, coaching has made me a better person, made me a better man, no doubt about it. Learning how to identify and respect other people's needs is something that I didn't have naturally.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't come naturally for me. I was in a place of self-preservation, you know, for a long time. And that, like, learning to connect with people that were strangers, that weren't people that were in my circle. You know, there were people I already cared about. Because it's easy to, you know, of course you're going to care about and take care of people you already care about, people that are close to your family, your friends, whatever. But learning how to meet new people and take them in and develop legitimate concern and respect for them, that was a skill. And, yeah, this was a big part of it. Like, if I didn't have this, I don't think I would have ever... That put me in another direction. And it's helped me with everything else I do, with writing and all the other stuff. You know? All this stuff, I think, one thing feeds the other, you know?
Good point. I think that's a good one to end on, unless you guys have anything you want to add.
No, I'm good.
Well,
All right.
We're
Thanks
good.
for coming
Thank
on,
you.
Swede.
yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.